All right, we are back for another episode of Around the Indoor Football World. I am joined by Krish Vyas and TJ Bartholomew, the always trusty co-hosts for this great show that we've built up over the past couple of years. Today, we're here to talk about the major four indoor football leagues: the TAL, the IFL, the NAL, and the AF1. But before we get to all of that, hit a quick intro video. Stick with us. There's lots to talk about and some great guests coming up today. All right. Looking forward to this episode today. As always, I'm joined by Krish Vyas and TJ Bartholomew. TJ, how you doing today?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Unfortunately, got to wait another week for the championship, but got to be patient, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to be a great game. Looking forward to that one. Krish, how are you doing this weekend?
I'm doing good, just enjoying some CFL on the off week. I think that's the closest thing to indoor football right now. So just enjoying that.
Fair point. Fair point. High emotion and, definitely lots of run game involved. So, yeah, I could definitely see that as far as the comparison there. Thank you this week in Arena Bowl and Brian Mathern for tuning in already. If you guys are watching, make sure to hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this with any of your friends that may be indoor football fans. Like I said before, we've got a lot to talk about today, including NAL expansion. We finally got some news on the expansion. A couple weeks ago, we had teased that there would be a couple Texas teams coming, and we got one announced officially. We've got another one that's kind of starting to float out there, it looks like, and we'll definitely get into that first. And then, as mentioned before, we got some great guests. We'll have Coach Dave Mogensen, formerly of the Iowa Barnstormers, on today. Andre Coles, the offensive coordinator for the Tulsa Oilers, and then also Gary Thomas, the head coach of the Southwest Kansas Storm. So definitely, like I said, lots to talk about today. But let's start with the announcement of the Dallas Bulls. I'll go ahead and pull up the press release here. But Krish, if you want to kind of lead us into this one.
Yeah, so the leadership is Dr. Cornelius Hudson. He was the former co-owner, majority owner of the original North Texas Bulls back in the day. He owned that with Tyrone Washington. I believe 70-30 split. So it's interesting to see him, kind of go back and buy a team and put it in Dallas. I will say they seem to have a good structure in place. They've hired a whole marketing team. They've been hiring people. I was looking at their Instagram yesterday. Their first hire came in November of 2024. So they have been building the groundwork for this for almost a year and a half. Right. So that's a good sign. And that shows, okay, now it's not something they came up with yesterday. I do have a problem with the logo. It's very unoriginal. It looks, I told someone the other day this is off Madden franchise mode. It is off Madden franchise mode. If you go in Madden 25, there's a Mexico team that has the same logo as the Dallas Bulls do. So I have a little bit of a problem with that they just cut, copy, and pasted it. But I've heard mixed things about Dr. Hudson. I've heard that he's very passionate about the game. I also heard he's I would just say interesting with the way he conducts business. I just hope my biggest thing, I want the team to be stable, but I also want them to be competitive on the field. I love my guy, Coach McGrone, but I don't want him blowing people out by 40, 50 every game. You know what I mean? Like, I want it to be competitive. I want this team to go out. I hope this team hired Victor Mann to be their head coach. They take the whole Iowa Woo staff too, and they'll make sure, like, if Victor Mann is the head coach, which is what I heard, he is the head coach, the team would definitely be competitive next year. So that's my thoughts on it.
Fair points. TJ, do you have any thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, like Krish said, it's coming out that they've been doing the groundwork for a while, which is good. It means a lot of planning went into it. The ownership seems very solid. So, I mean, overall, this seems like a very good move for the NAL. and it looks like they are moving forward and still kind of on that ramp up that we were talking about last year, where they really could solidify themselves as a league with a much better mantra than what's been in recent years.
That's fair. That's fair. And I mean, we talked about it a little bit ago. They already announced the Amarillo Warbirds. There's been rumors that there's another team coming in Texas that we talked about last season or last week. There's a chance that the NAL ends up with 3 teams in Texas, 2 teams in Colorado. You've got Omaha and Sioux City, which are super super easy travel back and forth. It looks like on the surface is that if everything works out according to plan, this entire NAL arrangement that we're seeing heading into 2026 is basically going to be centered in kind of the Midwest region of the country. And with that, it definitely seems like the travel would be a lot easier than we maybe saw last year with Wheeling and Columbus and Carolina on the East Coast, and you've got Idaho way out west. That's a widespread league. So the other piece of news that I wanted to discuss, which we'll get to here in just a second, is the removal of some of the teams from the league page. But before we get to that, I'm going to read this press release real quick from the Dallas Bulls. You can find this on the nationalarenaleague.com, the newly revamped website for the NAL. There's the logo that Krish was mentioning earlier. As the National Arena League owner meetings in Las Vegas draw to a close, league leadership has been hard at work shaping the direction of the NAL's future. While several announcements will be made in the coming days and weeks, the NAL is proud to share the first major update coming out of the meetings: the official acceptance of the Dallas Bulls as the league's 3rd expansion franchise for the 2026 season. When we announced Amarillo as our first expansion franchise, we made it clear that more teams would follow, said NAL Commissioner Brandon Eichert. Here at the owners' meetings, we finalized those plans, and we knew there was no better time to start making these announcements. The league plans to announce its other additions to the league over the next few weeks as the NAL continues to grow their footprint strategically nationwide. The Dallas Bulls name carries a strong legacy in arena football with roots in the Dallas-Fort Worth area dating back to the 1990s. One thing that we did not really touch on, and one of the things that I'm sure the astute fans that are watching this show are thinking in the back of their minds is this the same Bulls team that tried to join the NAL a couple seasons ago? And it is. It is the same Bulls team. Some things have changed with the formation of the franchise and kind of the front office. Do you guys have any concerns that this team doesn't make it to kickoff, given what happened a couple years ago? I think it was, 2023, Krish?
Yes, it was 2023.
Do you have any concerns with them making it to kickoff?
I think you always have concerns, right, for any expansion franchise. Honestly, if it's not the IFL, any other league expanding, I'm going to have concerns. I think, Dallas is a very difficult market to operate in. Our guest this morning, had some great insight in that, considering he works for the team and was also with the Dallas Stars in the front office. I think it's a hard market to operate in. It is, and the fact they haven't even, I've been told the NAL is going to schedule a press conference for them. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the arena setup is like. And just, I think you always have those concerns. So yeah, I definitely am concerned. I mean, I think there's more of a chance they do make it to the kickoff because they have laid a foundation and they were accepted. And I think the NAL is really, really ramping how they're vetting teams this year, it seems. I mean, I look at Pueblo and I look at the setup, she got over there. I look up Amarillo in West Texas. I mean, they nailed both those on the head, right? They went 2 for 2. I mean, you can't argue that at all. Those are great ownership groups. Both those teams will be highly successful next year. Dallas Bulls, I want to see what the press conference is. I want to see what the leadership team is like. And then I think I can make a full assessment if they'll play or not next year.
Makes sense. TJ, do you have any concerns with the Bulls coming back in?
I got to agree with Krish. If it was the IFL, they have such a strong vetting process that you don't really have to think about that stuff. But yeah, it's never a guarantee that teams are going to make it there. Do I think it's favorable with the info that we have, albeit early on, that they do make it to kickoff and play the whole season? Yeah, I think it's favorable that they do. Again, the groundwork has been there. They've and technically, like you said, they tried before. They've been behind the scenes working to get back into it, so they know what they need to do. So I think it's very favorable. Uh, you know, Dallas is a little bit of obviously a big sports market, maybe a tad oversaturated, some could argue. But, if they can capture, what the old Dallas Desperados did back in the AFL, obviously that was at the peak of popularity, but they had a very strong following. They had, a lot of sellout crowds. If they can capture some of that interest that Dallas used to have in arena football and indoor football, I think they'll be fine.
I like the thought. Definitely makes sense to me. And I do think they have a better picture of what they need to have in place in order to make this work in 2026. Obviously, why else would you do it? Why else would you come back to the NAL, and how would you get approved on top of that? I think I'm speaking with a fair amount of confidence in the fact that other owners are going to be fairly skeptical about adding you to the league after, you've already been added and then had to drop out before the season. So I think if anything, they're probably going to look at your finances and everything you've got in place a lot closer than they would maybe, a brand new ownership group that they don't know or don't have that negative history with. So I would think if the team's in the league now, it's probably because they feel very confident that there's not going to be those issues again this time. So I'm very interested to see how this all unfolds. So
I did want to mention that there was a photo put out from NAL league meetings, a Shreveport Rougarou table, and Keith Russ would not pictured on that photo. It was Keith Carter, who's the CEO. Keith Carter is an LSU booster, and he's a co-owner of he's a very well-known LSU booster, and he's a co-owner of the Shreveport team. And then sitting next to him was Michael Blair, the quarterback coach. So I don't know if that's the plan going forward, if Keith Carter is going to take over majority ownership and Michael Blair is going to take over that head coaching role. Just something to be aware of.
Good little nugget there. I did not notice that, and I had heard some rumors that Russ might be exiting the ownership group down there with Shreveport. So would not surprise me at all if that does end up happening. But this comment by Ricky Burtz certainly caught my attention, and I figured it would catch your guys' as well. I will say it now, guys. There's more new 2026 team announcements coming. Correction, teams with an S. Interesting. If you had to pick teams off the top of your head right now that look like natural fits to the NAL as it stands currently, who would you look at to potentially join the league for 2026? Let's go to
I
TJ
think right off
first.
the top, you would have to maybe consider like certain AL2 teams, maybe because they have already, they're used to playing obviously at a lower budget. Kind of do what what Wheeling did, a few years ago.
That's fair. That's fair. And maybe you open up some of the possibility of some of those East teams, the Columbus, your Wheelings, into returning if you do something like that, because, a lot of those AAL2 teams are very closely tied to the East Coast. So, I mean, you could potentially help yourself out by doing that as well. So
Yeah, I mean, one of the teams that we mentioned on the show, a couple of weeks ago, that looking at joining the NAL is Solana Liberty, right? We talked about them possibly joining and, that impact that it would have. But I mean, I don't know if I really believe that. I'm still on that fence where, I mean, I like what TJ's saying about the AL2 teams, but I think the biggest thing is like there's no team in the AL2 that have the facilities to play in the NAL. I mean, the Mississippi Wolfpack would be the closest thing, but I mean, they play in a farmyard, right? Like it's not really like a stadium or a field, so they would need to get a field. But I think Mississippi could be a great market in arena football. I think that team is destined I mean, the team that they had last year, the Raiders, they sold out on season tickets. Like they had over 1,000 season ticket deposits. So my thing is like if they can build that market up, like Eddie Strong, I think he's going to build that market up with the next 2 to 3 years. They'll definitely be ready for that jump. But I mean, Salina, maybe another team I could see joining. I don't know. I don't feel like there's any teams. Anything that Idaho team, the relocation, I don't think they'll have enough time. I don't think it'll work. I think Idaho's going to go dormant in 2026, in my opinion. That's like my big NAL take right now in terms of expansion.
I could see that happening, and that's a pretty I feel fair take. Just given how late we are already in the off season and not really having a lot of information, but it wouldn't surprise me if they come back late in the season as well. You got to figure that the league's going to have a little bit more leniency towards Idaho and Chris Reynolds because of their past with the league and being.
What about Wichita? Wichita. I mean, ICT. We haven't really heard anything from the regulators. Maybe that could be an opportunity too.
It would make sense. I mean, if you're trying to attract the Kansas teams, which, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of these moves are definitely piquing the curiosity of those two teams. I think, adding a Wichita team only furthers that interest from, Salina, Southwest Kansas. So it would make a lot of sense for them to bring in the Wichita team if they're still out there these days. I haven't heard anything about or from that team in a while, so it's honestly kind of a question mark to me. So that would be, that would be an interesting addition and something that it would not surprise me entirely if they did kind of pop up out of nowhere and come back. But we got a couple comments I want to roll through, primarily because one of them has a very good suggestion here. Chris Dodson says, looking for a team to broadcast on the Southern Sports Network next season. I believe he's in the Ohio area. So definitely get him on Facebook. He will definitely help you out on there. Yeah, I wonder, Brian says. If Russ is gone, great rejoicing. Wookie says Tyler Crude. So this is the one that I wanted to highlight because this is the team that has kind of been floating out there as of recently. People have started to take notice of their page, started to follow them. And it's one of the teams that, in my mind, makes a lot of sense for the NAL based off logistic reasons. I mean, they're obviously right there, in the backyard of multiple other NAL teams at this point. So what are you guys' thoughts on the potential addition of the Tyler Crude? And here's their page on Facebook. Go follow the Tyler Crude now. And they've got a press conference coming Wednesday, August 20th at 1 p.m. in just 4 days. Will they be announcing the National Arena League for 2026?
Yes. Yes, I believe this is a team that they're. I mean, if he's saying that there's more teams, this is definitely. I mean, that's has NAL written all over it, in my opinion. Definitely. I don't know, TJ. What do you think about the logo? It's kind of interesting. I mean, it's better. It's better than the Bulls logo, but it's not like it. I think it's a slightly step above, but it's like equal to the Punisher logo, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think about this logo?
So it's one of the best logos in the league?
No. Far from it.
It definitely doesn't look like a straight clip art copy, so that's already an upgrade.
Right.
No, I mean, hey, if they announced NAL, I wouldn't feel any negative way about it. I would be excited to, see what they could bring. I think because they're so new, I don't really know too much about them, so I don't know who the ownership group is or anything like that. But I mean, it would be proof of the NAL and their vetting process, though. I'll tell you that much.
Well, here's another comment that sticks out to me right here. Wow, that email and phone number looks familiar. He's saying that because the email is tied to, I believe, Richard Rogers, who was previously with Shreveport. So could be an interesting situation there. You know, you
Yeah, I
mentioned
don't like
Keith
that dude.
Russ.
I didn't like him when I first watched the interview with him. I'm like, yeah, I don't like this dude. He's so full of himself. I mean, like I told you, man, like he lied about playing at University of Arkansas, and then he said he played for Bill Walsh at Arkansas, and Bill Walsh didn't coach the years that he said he played. So he lying on air and lying to people, and that's how he. I mean, I don't like how he rolls. I've heard he doesn't answer phone calls. He doesn't, communicate with players. He's rude. So I'm not a fan of him. So if he's involved, like I'm already out on Tyler Crew, to be honest.
I'm kind of thinking that that's the way we're headed. I'm wondering if this is not the organization that Keith Russ and Richard Roberts will now be involved in. If the rumors are true and Keith Carter took full ownership of the Shreveport Rougarou, then that kind of leaves wide open for those two guys to go start another team. Which they kind of did in Shreveport. They started a team. They brought in another owner. Now they're kind of working their way out of that organization and moving on to a new venture. So maybe this is a way that you start to prop up franchises as the National Arena League. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the best course of action or most popular, but it's a way to get teams started and get ownership groups in markets that makes sense to the league. So similar to the TAL's approach, just not quite as blatantly, to generate ownership groups, if that makes sense. Any other thoughts on the NAL? Oh, shoot. My fault. Before we move on, one of the other big pieces of news recently is the fact that Wheeling and Columbus no longer appear on the NAL website. Now, we've been reporting for a while that Columbus and Wheeling both decided to opt out after the season. They have ultimately decided to keep their options open for the 2026 season and could be a part of this big realignment that we've been talking about for a while. Does this surprise you guys at all on the changes for the NAL website? Also, we do have a guest joining us. We'll be bringing them on here shortly to get their takes on this as well.
For me, I think, Columbus is a legacy franchise. And, anytime you lose a legacy franchise that's competitive, it's a big deal. I think they'll try to, I don't like how this is being kind of downplayed, just in the media and what I see. It's like not a big deal. It's a big deal. And I think this is a big deal to lose with Columbus for sure. I mean, Columbus was a very competitive franchise last year. They made it to the conference championship. They were, some coaching and play calling away from really taking that jump and being in a championship game, in my opinion. That defense was amazing all year for them. So losing them is huge. Wheeling, after Coach Reds left, that was kind of Coach Reds was doing everything. He was the GM, the head coach. He was director of marketing. He was doing all the partnerships and everything, kind of building that franchise up. So when he left, I was like, okay, now they're kind of in trouble long term. I would love to see them in the AF1. I would love to see them in the AF1. I don't know if they have the budget to move in the AF1 and the desire to do that, but I mean, I really hope they don't start their own league. I mean, and it looks like they are, but I mean, we don't need another league. We already have 45 leagues. Let's join another league or close up shop for the year. Like, it doesn't make sense to continue to keep joining leagues. And TJ, what did you say yesterday about the Columbus Lions and what their legacy will be in indoor football?
TJ, any thoughts?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think, when you think of legacy teams, Columbus has been around for a while, but I mean, really, what's their legacy about? It's about playing in like the AIF and steamrolling teams to an easy championship. Then as soon as they got to the NAL, they're getting blown out in the championships year after year. Gibson leaves, same thing, new coach, everything else. It's the same situation, in my opinion. Now, that's not me trash talking them. That's just me being honest. I'm kind of channeling my inner Krish here and just being blunt, you know. uh, so I mean, if you'd have told me at the beginning of the season that Columbus probably leaves after this year, I wouldn't be super surprised because I'd be like, oh, well, they probably didn't win a championship, so now they're going to go to a lower league or something like that. Because from my understanding, the NAL is the most inexpensive league for costs. So I definitely don't see them, going to the IFL. Obviously, even from what I know, the AF1 has a higher entrance fee. So, I mean, I think I would have to lean towards both Columbus and Wheeling, maybe going to lower leagues, or for Wheeling, maybe going back to with the AL relaunching, supposedly. Who knows? But Wheeling did surprise me though. I definitely thought they were going to stick around for at least a year or two because they really started to get some good momentum, both in support and also turning their season around a little bit as the season went on. So that one did surprise me a little bit. But yeah, I really hope they don't start their own league. Like Krish said, it's already starting to get, if not already, at the point of oversaturation. So that'll just be more detrimental than anything.
Absolutely. Please remember to hit the like button if you're watching. At this point, we are going to welcome on the very recent head coach of the Iowa Barnstormers, Mr. Dave Mogensen. Coach, how you doing this morning?
Hey, guys. How's it going? I'm well.
Glad to hear it. So we talked off camera, so I know you kind of been keeping privy on the information on the other leagues recently.
Sure.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the events recently with the NAL in terms of the teams they've added and the teams they're potentially subtracting?
Yeah, I think your guys' analysis is probably pretty spot on. I don't think Wheeling and Columbus are going to disappear, but there's so many leagues below the top four that you guys talk a lot about with IFL, AF1, the TAL, the NAL. I would probably say the NAL's the fourth on that list, and maybe from a financial standpoint, you don't know the inner workings of the teams, which is something that across all the different journalist things, nobody really knows the true insides of the teams financially and what they contribute to and what is important for them. So I would assume that most likely Wheeling and Columbus are looking for a league that they have to spend a little less money in traveling or a little less money in player salary or something along those lines is my thought. But I don't think they'll be gone.
Completely fair. I feel the exact same. They're definitely not going anywhere. What are your thoughts on the addition of the Dallas Bulls and the Pueblo Punishers?
Pueblo is, I think, going to be more stable than Dallas Bulls. I mean, Dallas Bulls are a little bit unknown. I'm hearing they're totally new ownership group from the North Texas Bulls, but to keep the Bulls and to be in the same area, and you're kind of like, is this going to be the same thing? So, but Pueblo has people involved who've been involved with some other teams, and I feel like they're going to be a strong franchise in that league at least. And I know some of the coaches that they're hired, at this point, I think hired, they haven't announced it yet, so I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but I think they have some solid people involved in the front office and on the coaching staff, and I think they'll be a good franchise there.
I definitely agree on that front. Big fan of Lisa and in the ownership group. I think she definitely has a good grasp on what it's going to take to make this work. So super excited about that, and hopefully them being around for many years to come. TJ, is there anything else you can think of off the top of your head, NAL-wise, we need to cover before we move on?
Nope, not that I can think of.
I think we've pretty much tapped everything on NAL. At that point, we're going to play a quick commercial. We'll be right back, and then we'll discuss some IFL, and discuss maybe even the departure from Iowa, which I know I want to hear the story. I'm sure everybody else does as well. All right. Once again, thank you to our new sponsor, the Omaha Beef. Check out their merchandise store to help support the team and keep them going in 26 and beyond. So, Coach, obviously, anybody who follows the IFL is aware of the news, with you in Iowa. So I wanted to kind of just give you a moment to kind of set this record straight, tell us your side of the story, and maybe kind of clear up some of the question marks about what has happened and why you're no longer with Iowa.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit clear cut and dry. I mean, the fact that we didn't win a lot of games last year is a factor, but I didn't get fired like the day after the season. So it wasn't like when the season was over, oh, we're getting rid of this guy. There was conversations had between myself and the front office on what was necessary to help us to get us back to contention. And for me, it was a resource thing. So I felt like even my whole 4 seasons there, we just lacked resources that other teams in the IFL had, and it was a frustrating thing to deal with. But the IFL is growing immensely. Even from when I first got to Iowa in end of 2021 for the 2022 season, like the growth is immense. And all the new teams coming in, Fishers and Tulsa and Vegas, and they all have these great infrastructures and they have all these great resources. And we just kept, as they brought in new teams that had better resources, we went from kind of middle in the pack in Iowa with as far as resources to the bottom of the pack, and that's just not something I can control. So I had kind of I guess a list of non-negotiables, like this has to change from these resources. Part of that is me seeing it, part of that is talking to the guys on the team, but it just wasn't going to work unless we had these resources, and they didn't want to do that. So it was an opportunity to approach a buyout and let them find somebody else that maybe was more confident in their ability to do stuff with those resources. But I don't want to bash them, and I hope that they give some of those resources to whoever they hire. There's some, good guys out there that probably are applying and talking about the job, whether it's, new guys looking for their first head coaching job, like, Rod Windsor's or Xavier Jackson's or Matt Barron's, or some of the experienced guys like, Andre Coles or Rod Miller or Tom Menas. There's guys out there who are very capable of doing the job, but, the Barnstormers haven't ever been. The funny thing is you get online and you see those people like, oh, this storied franchise, like, oh my God, they're so bad right now. Mogensen's an idiot. I'm like, this franchise has storied history is of being bad forever, outside of Kurt Warner, which was 30 years ago, and then Dixie's magical run where they had a really good couple of years. I'm only the fourth coach in the history of the Barnstormers to make the playoffs in 30 years. There's only 4 coaches that have done it. So the history of the team is kind of like, hey, we have a team, we're here, but we're not super interested in like always being the best and giving the resources necessary to make you the best. And there was times in the IFL when the IFL was first, kind of building up, where limited resources, if you had things go the right way, you could be all right. But the margins for us now are just so thin with the resources that were provided that, man, it was really difficult. I almost left after my first year, to be honest with you, and after my second year. It's just really, you're wearing more hats there than, you talked about Coach Resignalo and Wheeling. It is a similar situation where you're doing everything there. Like, you're doing everything. You're not just coaching. And it's nice to be at a place where you're the football coach and you're doing some player personnel, obviously, but you're just coaching football. You're not taping ankles and making sure that you're selling sponsorships because nobody else really is doing it. And you're trying to figure out, where are we going to practice? Where are we going to do this? Like, you got to do all that stuff over there. And that's just not the case at a lot of other IFL places this day and age, because the IFL is growing so much. It's really kind of like two-headed sword of good and bad.
I could see that. Definitely would like to say, the level of competition in the IFL over the past few seasons has really kind of risen dramatically, I would say. And I definitely hear what you're saying. I mean, resources wise, from the outside looking in, it definitely seems like Fishers, Vegas, teams like that. Some of the newer teams have a lot more financial backing behind them that can help them provide some pretty crazy amenities for some of these guys. So that definitely helps when you're recruiting, I imagine. I wanted to pull up this comment for you. Ricky Bird says Coach Mogensen is a complete class act. Looking forward to seeing where he ends up. Will be a definite asset to whatever organization he lands with. Which brings me to my next question, of course. And I'm sure you'll be a little coy on this one, but can you kind of elaborate on who, if at all, or what leagues you've talked to in terms of
Sure.
going back to be a
I
head
mean,
coach?
I don't want to, as I said when we were talking about me coming on, I don't want to give into the conversations, but I can give you some background. So I appreciate that from Ricky. I mean, that's talking in class act. You know, Omaha is one of the standards for how to run an operation. So that's pretty great comment. So thanks for that. As far as who I've talked to a lot of people. It's only been a week, I guess, week and however many 3 days since we kind of came to that conclusion. So I've talked to teams in the IFL. I've talked to teams with openings in the IFL. I've talked to teams with opening in AF1. I've talked to teams with opening in the TAL. So I don't think the NEL has any openings. Nobody's reached out to me. I've talked to a lot of IFL teams about, a lot of people reached out and said, "Oh, I can't believe this is going on, blah, 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 blah. Let me know when you know what you're doing. If an assistant role is something you're interested in." So for me, it's kind of figuring out, the thing about this level is it's not, it's not like the NFL. I'm not Matt Rule and just got a multi-million-dollar buyout to go sit on my couch for 2 or 3 years, right? It's not the same. My buyout allows me maybe a month to go find another job doing something before bills have to be paid that I can't cover. So it's for me, it's trying to figure out what's my next move. Is it going to be staying in coaching as a head coach, or is it going to be going out and finding, for lack of a better term, a real job and then doing some coaching or some assistanting on the side and things like that? So that's what I'm kind of working through right now. But I have had conversations about some open head coach roles across a couple different leagues.
Glad to hear it. TJ, did you have any questions for Coach?
Yeah. Since obviously you have the inside track on the IFL, we talked about growth and how much the leagues, been coming up in the last couple of years specifically. Do you see in the next few years the IFL potentially getting to where, say, the original AFL was in the late 90s, early 2000s?
I do think that's the goal. Now, I don't know if you look at the grand scheme of that, the AFL in the mid 90s, late 2000s was really a true pro league where guys were making hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were on ESPN, selling out stadiums. So I don't know if the IFL will ever get to that, just because of the way the world is. Every major sports league is losing fans as far as in-game attendance outside of the NFL and outside of games where Caitlin Clark's playing. So those are the two that, baseball's down, hockey's down, NBA's down, viewership's down. So I don't think it's necessarily a thing about the IFL or indoor football. It's just there's so much stuff to do now on the internet and things. So, but I think the way the IFL is going, it's going to be as close to that as any other league's going to be. I know they're talking there's going to be some teams coming in, not this year. It's going to be a similar thing. I think the Fishers, where they'll announce a few teams that are coming in 27. So they'll announce them, give them a year to get everything in order and sell some season tickets and come in. But I think by 2027, you're going to have over 20 teams in the league, and it's just going to continue to grow. And the growth for the IFL, the thing I like about it is it's the structured growth. They're not just saying, give me as many teams as I can right now. They put a lot of time and vetting into the ownership groups, and can these guys sustain the team if nobody bought a ticket? Let's say you started a franchise and sold no tickets and no sponsorships. Can you still run this team for 2 or 3 years if you had no income coming in? Which isn't the case, but that's like the worst case scenario, and the IFL really does a good job of vetting in it. So I think the IFL is going to be as close to that as we've seen since it happened.
I think that's a fair point. They definitely seem to have a lot better process to bring teams in. I really like the way that they have kind of a year build up. It seems like that's a really good way to give teams the opportunity to build a foundation for their first season. So Tony O'Neill says IFL looks sold out to me in games I'm watching. I would imagine, Coach, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine you kind of missed some of the regular season given you were coaching your season. So I could see that. Vegas had a really good turnout this past weekend in the playoffs, but that's the playoffs. So not every game is sold out by any stretch.
Yeah, is it convenient in where you set your people? The camera is only coming from one side on the feeds, so if you sell 40% of your tickets and you put them all in the area where the camera can see it, it does look sold out.
That's a good point. That's a good point too. Tricks of the camera are very important at this level for sure. So obviously you have a unique view on the upcoming championship game. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts and your kind of breakdown of what you expect in the next couple weeks here.
Yeah, we're the only team that this year played both Green Bay and Vegas. We played Vegas in non-conference game. Obviously we play Green Bay every year when I was with Iowa. So it's funny because like 2 weeks before the playoffs started, I had a couple of people messaging me, hey, who's going to make the playoffs? And one of the guys is like a betting guy. So he's always messaging me to try to get inside information for his bets, I think. He's always posted his bets. But I said, if I had to pick right now, Vegas and Green Bay are playing the best football at each side. I said, I really don't see anybody beating Vegas in the West. I think Vegas is going to come out of the West, for sure. And I said, Green Bay, if Max Mailer continues to play the way he's playing, nobody in the East is going to beat them. Quad Cities, if they have a really good defensive game, maybe beats them, but Max is playing so good at football. He has been really all year. The only games that they've lost is when he's had a average game and not a phenomenal game. So I kind of saw that happening, but man, it's going to be a good game because it's two offenses that are incredible. Green Bay's defense, probably not quite as talented as Vegas's defense, but Max Mailer, I don't care what defense you put out in front of him. If you don't get a lot of pressure on him, he is going to carve you up and put up a lot of points on the board.
I would say there's definitely a reason why he led the league in passing touchdowns this season by quite a wide margin.
Not a wide margin, only by 3.
By 3?
Yeah, he only beat Cahoon, our guy, by 3, and he played 3 more games.
Oh, yeah. We won't talk about the IFL stats department, but
it's not good.
Lacking a little bit on the website, though.
Max did have like 20 rushing touchdowns or something, and our guy had 1.
That's fair. So obviously there's a lot to discuss here with the championship game. One of the storylines that I find very interesting, and we know we'll probably see a lot of Jaden DeLora, but Jerome Johnson and Max Mailer facing each other after both being in Green Bay to start their career. I find that really interesting. TJ, any thoughts on the championship game overall, or any thoughts on who you see winning?
Well, I am openly a Vegas fan in the IFL, so obviously I got to go with them. But I think it's going to be a really tough game. It's going to be a really good game. I think it's going to follow the mantra of the majority of the previous championship games, and playoff games rather from this season. It's going to be probably on the higher scoring side. It's going to be super close, entertaining, and probably another overall home run hit for the IFL. It's probably. I mean, I'd be remiss to say the total's probably going to be. I'd probably put it at over 110. I see it being like a really high scoring game.
Yeah, I would agree on that as well. And we'll get Krish back here in a second to give his best bets, and we'll look at the odds as well. But moving on slightly, I figured this would be a topic that Coach Mogensen could touch on quite well. Quion Williams, hopefully I pronounced his name correctly, has signed with the Memphis Showboats. The Showboats are quickly becoming the indoor football team that is now playing outdoors. They have 7 different players that I know of off the top of my head that have some sort of background in indoor football, whether it's the IFL, the AF1, or the NAL. Coach, tell us what makes Williams so good and how he was able to dominate so well this season.
Yeah, he does a lot of things really well as far as just his natural athletic ability. So his releases, the thing that you don't necessarily see a lot in indoor because you're doing the motion so much, is his on the line releases are elite, like as good as I've seen in anybody I've ever coached or seen anywhere. So that's going to help in a lot in outdoor where we're not doing, at least in the UFL, obviously Canada, you can do the motion, but you're not motioning all the time. So his releases are elite, but he's just a really, really hard worker. So he wasn't, the interesting about Keon is he wasn't like an all world guy in college. Good career, a couple years at Eastern Michigan, third team All MAC at Buffalo. It wasn't like he was tearing the world on fire in college, but he really bought into after the fact, and he was up in Toronto for like a week, and then they let him go, and then he was just kind of like sitting at home, training, getting ready, and not sure what he's going to do when we called him and got him to come play. It was really late before the 2024 season, and he came in and we got to see him move around live, and then he really bought into the coaching aspect and then just the body aspect. Like he's not the same guy that came out of Buffalo 2 years ago. Like his whole body is reinvented. He really bought into the training aspect, and so he's probably a little bit faster. I know he hasn't run a 40 like per se, but he's he's a little faster, a little bigger, a little stronger, and then he really focused on all the technique tangible stuff, and that's really the difference from having a really good rookie year. He's a little banged up his rookie year, he missed a couple games, and then having like just, I knew coming in to this season like this dude's going to be incredible. Obviously you don't know triple crown type of thing, but you knew he's going to be really, really good. And it's just his dedication to changing his body and really focusing on the craft of being a wideout and not just using natural ability.
Love it. Love it. Love to see him get an opportunity. Obviously that's what it's all about. He put on a show this season. I think he had 33 total touchdowns, 6 on the ground, 27 through the air, went over 1,000 yards, 90 plus receptions. Just a heck of a season by him. So honestly, very excited to see him get the opportunity and see what he can do with the other indoor guys out there like Sam Castronova, Isaiah Williams, Isaiah Scott. Man, so many guys that have signed with that team this season. So it's very interesting to see how that all shakes out up in this upcoming season as well. But another piece of information that I think will be something you can lend some unique insight into is Jermaine Hampton was recently hired as the defensive coordinator by the Salina Liberty. You got to see this man coach firsthand. What are the Liberty getting in Coach Hampton?
Yeah, Coach Hampton and I worked together my first 2 years in Iowa. I kind of gave him his first opportunity indoors. What you're getting with Jermaine Hampton is a Tony Dungy disciple. So he played for Tony Dungy in Indianapolis with the Colts. The thing about Coach Hampton that I think was always the coolest is he literally he could stand in the back of a defense, that the typical defensive coach that can stand back in the back of the defensive secondary during a practice. And he sees everything that's happening. Like he can come out and after that, he can say, well, this guy did that, ran that route, and that guy ran that route, and that guy ran that route. And this is what we should have done. So he still looks like he could go out there and do it. And there would be times in practice where he'd be like, no, you got to do it like this. And he'd jump out there and you're like, man, maybe I should sign him for a couple games. He could probably give me 2 or 3 more games. So phenomenal player at that time, but really good defensive mind. The cover 2 thing, which really is a hot defense in indoor. A lot of teams like to run variations of cover 2, and he has all that stuff from his time playing for Tony Dungy and has had some success. We had a pretty good defense the first year we were here, and he was kind of like spearheading that. And then I think he was with the Louisiana franchise last year, and it was a big hot mess, but not because of him, just because structurally they had some issues and guys weren't getting paid. They didn't have resources that they were supposed to have. So that kind of fizzled out, but it wasn't really because he did anything negatively. So I think he'll be a good fit in that style of defense. He played for the Rush back in the day, so he has some AFL experience. He knows a little bit about the differences in the AF1 or the AFL style of play versus indoor. So he can take some of the changes because you can't obviously run the same type of cover 2s in arena football that you can in indoor football. So, but he has that experience from playing for the Rush back in the day to do a little bit of that as well.
Very nice. Thank you for that breakdown. I appreciate it. At this time, we're going to welcome on our other IFL guest for this morning, the offensive coordinator for the Tulsa Oilers, and a man that actually coached against Coach Mogensen earlier on this season, Mr. Andre Coles.
Coach, how are you guys? Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. How you doing this morning?
Good. No complaints. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Thank you for giving us some of your time this morning.
Absolutely.
Got quite a bit to talk about with the season that Tulsa had, I imagine. So I don't want to go too far back, but would you mind touching on the Frisco situation and how you kind of found out what was going on with them?
Yeah, it was pretty simple. Just an ownership group where the father was sick, and they actually don't live in Texas, so they live in Columbus, Ohio. So they just had to make a decision, and what was best for their family. So they did everything that they could do to try to find a new owner, but with those timelines and paperwork and legalities and all that kind of stuff like that, we kind of just ran out of time. So I found out the minute that it happened, and we wanted to let the players and all of those guys know first before it kind of went public. But internally, we kind of knew what the situation was. But it was a family decision on their part, had nothing to do with financials or anything like that. It just cost them a lot of money to keep traveling down to Texas. And it was their dad's passion project. And with him being sick, they just had to make a decision. So unfortunate, but you can understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine that was a pretty tough decision for the family, given that, that's kind of the father's passion project and he's the one going through the medical issues. Yep. Chris, you invited Coach Coles on, so you want to go ahead and kick off with some questions here?
Yeah, Coach, I appreciate your time. I think one of my questions for you, I know you had an opportunity to work with the Dallas Stars, in the front office. Do you think a team, an indoor team, can be successful financially in the Dallas market?
Yes, but it just takes a lot of work. There's so much competition. In Frisco alone, when we were there, you have the Rough Riders, you have the G League team, the Legends, you have FC Dallas, on top of the Stars, the Cowboys who are down the street, and the Mavericks. So you just got to hit the ground running, and you really got to do a lot of grassroots efforts to get it going. For as successful as we were as a team, there were a lot of people that didn't know we had a team. Every time you'd walk around with the Frisco Fighters indoor football, like, wait, there's a football team here, and then Frisco has some weird rules as far as marketing and advertising. There's no billboards in town, because Frisco's just kind of becoming this big, popular kind of town with PGA and all those places moving in. So there was definitely some challenges and some struggles and just a lot of competition. If we had a home game the same day as the Rough Riders, everyone's going outside to the Rough Riders game. They got dollar dogs and dollar beers, so it's kind of hard to beat.
Great marketing plan there.
And it's every game. I mean, they've got a pool up in the outfield. I mean,
all right. Note to self: get a pool in Frisco, and the indoor football team's going to be successful. TJ, do you have any questions for Coach?
With hearing news from the NAL that another Dallas team's coming in, do you feel that the market is a tad oversaturated, or that they can be successful?
So the Dallas Bulls have traditionally played out of Fort Worth, not Dallas. They used to be the North Texas Bulls. They've been around for a while. I know they've got some new ownership, and I'm not exactly sure where they're trying to play or where they're trying to go, but you can play anywhere within 2 hours and call yourself Dallas. So I just don't know where they're going to go. Before the Frisco Fighters, there was a team up in Allen, a Revolution. So there's been teams here, and they've had some success. It's really just about kind of sticking and staying. If you're going to put a team in this market and think that you're going to pop up and make money in your first year, you're kind of lying to yourself. So I just hope that the new ownership group kind of invest in it and doesn't abandon it after 1 year. But they've been around for a while.
All right, let's switch gears here a little bit. Coach Mogensen, do you have a question for Coach Coles?
I don't necessarily have any questions for Coach Coles. I'm not here for my journalistic attributes. So Coach Coles does a really good job with what he does. I think one thing that people lose sight of is when you coach really good players, he got able to coach TJ for all those years, is you tend to put a lot of stock in the great ability of those players. But if you look at a guy like TJ, every year he's had a really good season. He's had Andre Coles standing behind him, coaching him and helping him out. So he does a really, really good job every place he's been at. Obviously, Tulsa had a nice year. Frisco, he did a good job. And he was a good job the couple years when Billy was there, coaching TJ. And TJ was the spearhead of all their success. So I don't really necessarily have any questions, just some kudos for Coach who does a really good job.
Love it. Love it.
Appreciate that. Well, I can say the same thing about Mogs. I mean, you guys see his offense, so the numbers speak for themselves, man. It's a nightmare playing against that dude. You know he's going to scheme you up. So
absolutely. So there was kind of a running joke, Coach Coles. I'm sure you saw it this offseason, that the Tulsa Oilers were kind of becoming Frisco North, so to speak. TJ Edwards, Faison McClurge, Jerminic Smith, Martez Carter. I'm sure I could go on and on about all the different players that can up there. Talk to me about some of your relationships with these guys. Obviously, sometimes when it comes to recruiting at this level, it's more about who you know more than maybe what you know sometimes, or how much money you have to spend. So talk to me about the process of getting some of those guys to stick together and come with you up there to Tulsa.
So I spent my entire arena career. I played quarterback 9 seasons. I played at this level. So I get it. I understand the guys aren't making much money. I understand their struggles. I kind of understand what they're going through. And the biggest thing for me with coaching at this level is just helping these guys be better men. And that's not necessarily an on the field thing. So when we were in Frisco, I did as much as I could to help them find jobs, make sure their living situations were okay. We didn't have a ton of housing in Frisco. There was this perception that Frisco had all this money. We had like three-bedroom apartments. So all these guys lived at home while they played for us. So you're dealing with their family stuff. You're dealing with their kids stuff. Some of our practices look like daddy daycare sometimes, just whatever you got to do to get up here. So I think when they realize that you care about them as people before football players, they kind of stick with you and they'll play for you. And we've been fortunate enough to get so many guys moved up, benefiting from being in Frisco with the UFL being down the street. And there's a lot of CFL scouts that live in Texas that they just kind of know that you're going to do the right thing by them. And it kind of makes them trust you wherever you go.
Makes perfect sense. Both of you guys have had pretty good success moving players up to the next level in your programs. With Faison McClurge kind of bouncing back and forth this past season, and hopefully TJ eventually getting an opportunity up there in the UFL or the CFL. I'm not quite sure what's held him back so far, to be honest. But maybe you guys can kind of elaborate. And this is a question for both Coach Coles and Coach Mogensen. What are some of the tactics or techniques you guys use to help recruit? I mean, obviously at this level, your players aren't getting rich playing indoor football. They're doing it for a stepping stone to something else, primarily, or some guys, just are independently wealthy and really want to play football. But how do you go about recruiting or finding the reason why a guy is going to come play for you?
You can go, Coach.
Oh, got it. I think for me, maybe Coach Coles has had a similar thing in Frisco because they didn't have a giant checkbook either. It's identifying fit for what you do. Like what I did was a lot different than some other teams. If you look at like us compared to Fishers is a ground and pound team, and they're trying to do that. So they're looking for different type of athletes. So there was some semblance of, part of the reason that we've had really good wideouts every year I've been there is because I go out and find guys that are good at that skill and other people don't necessarily value. But the biggest thing is, even if you're in a place where you're making a little bit more money, there are IFL teams that pay people a little bit more than they're supposed to, or whatever, however you want to frame that. The money you're making really it's not like a sustainable for a year in any IFL team. You're not like, oh, I'm just working my 16 weeks here and then I just train like an NFL player in the offseason. You're not doing that. So it's really trying to sell the opportunity that you can feature somebody and give them a chance to showcase what they can do, because everybody you're talking to feels like when they get in the league, they're going to be the best player in the IFL. They have that thought, but you need to have that thought and have that drive to be a good athlete. You have to have that confidence level. So it's trying to show a guy that you really like, I'll use Keon because we talked about Keon. He didn't have a whole bunch of people talking to him when I found him, but it was like, hey, I really believe in what you can do on film in our system, and I think we'll be able to feature you to the point where you get an opportunity in a higher league. Because it's not always, you look sometimes, like if you compare it to like NFL, there's guys who are high draft picks, go to a team, and they fizzle out. And it's not necessarily because they're bad players, because the fit wasn't as good as they thought it was going to be, and they're not featured in a way that showcases their strengths. And then they go to another team, and all of a sudden they're an all-pro player because they got into a better system. So it's really trying to sell that aspect. If you have good facilities and amenities, we didn't necessarily have that, so I didn't really try to touch on that in Iowa. But like, if you're at a place where it has really good amenities, hey, these are great apartments, or we have this great rehab, or look at our weight room facility, or look at all our food partners. Like, there's things you can sell in that aspect as well if you're really strong in those categories.
Yeah, for sure. Everything that coach said is spot on. I think the only thing that I would add on to that, something that I look for, like I want to coach guys that don't want to be in the IFL long. You have to have a drive to want to get out of the league and move up. And by moving up, sometimes that may not necessarily be the UFL or CFL, but it might just be a bigger job, or starting a career. If we can put you in front of sponsors, if we can put you like working with the Dallas Stars, if we can teach you sponsorships, if we can teach you how to sell tickets, just preparing them for the next level. You have to have some sort of drive about you, and you have to want more. Those guys who are comfortable just being in an IFL are usually not guys that you want to coach. Those are usually the guys that you got to drag along, that don't want to sit and film. So I spend a lot of time at combines and camps and those type of things, because those guys still have a hunger and a drive about them. Luckily, down here in Texas, there's one every weekend that you can kind of pop up to, with the Blue Gray and then the Dream Bowl, and then CGS is down here, which is run by Jose Jefferson, which is the former IFL coach. So he'll point you in the direction of, hey, that's an IFL guy, that's an IFL guy, that's an IFL guy. So that's one thing that I always look for, is a guy that still has some hunger or still has some passion. And you might run into some guys that, have been in the league for 2, 3, 4 seasons, but they still have a drive to get outside. So I would just add that on to everything that Coach Mo said.
That makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. TJ, Krish, do you guys have anything for Coach? Either coach?
Yeah, Coach Coles. My question for you, the running back room, kind of towards the end of the season. Talk to me about what led to the decision to kind of stick with Jimmy Smith over Hassan Rogers.
So actually, Jimmy Smith was our starter going into the season. So he's very, very quiet about it. But Jimmy Smith, his dad is the all-time lead receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He just doesn't talk about it. They're just a humble family and a humble kid. So that kid's a football player. Played at Louisville with Lamar Jackson, and we had him in Frisco as kind of like a two-headed monster with Meatball. And this was supposed to be the year that it was going to be his show. Just had an unfortunate injury in camp and a special teams drill, and kind of tore his arm up. But towards the end of the season, Hassan Rogers became a father. And I just told him, hey, man, that's your first priority. That's your first priority. Go home, be there for the birth of your kid, and, figure that out. And then Jimmy was at practice every day. He was around. He was still there. He was still in the mix. So when that time came, it was kind of a life decision. It wasn't football at all. Jimmy worked himself to be in shape, and, Sauce had to take care of his responsibilities at home. So much more of a man decision than it was a football one.
And then for you, Coach Mobes, you had the opportunity to work with the youngest GM in the IFL currently, in Julie Pipette. Kind of talk to me about your working relationship with her and how you help mentor her into like the GM she is today.
I don't know is she the youngest? I thought Destiny might be a little younger in Quad Cities, but she's probably near the youngest. She's a little bit younger than I am. First thing, Jimmy Smith is really, really good, by the way. So he's a freaking good player, man. It's a no-brainer. Sauce Rogers, great player, but Jimmy Smith is like an elite football player. So he's a really good player. As far as working with Julie, I think Julie has worked for the Barnstormers for 15 years. So she, her dad was the GM, but she was her dad's right-hand woman, I guess you say. But so she's been working for the organization forever. She's still going to work for the organization. She knows everything that has come across the board in indoor or arena football. She has seen it. That's good and bad. Sometimes she's like, no, have an idea of how to do something to get engagement. She goes, well, we did that in 2009 and it didn't work. So she's seen everything. There's maybe you might want to open up a little bit. Maybe things are different now, but As far as mentoring her, I didn't have to do a lot of mentoring of her at all. I mean, she's been there, done that, seen it all in some way, shape, or form. And she's very, I mean, she's actually technically part owner of the team because her dad had ownership shares that went to her and her mom. So she owns a small percentage of the team as well.
Wow. TJ, do you have any questions for either coach?
No, I have. I just want to say thank you guys for coming on. I do have to leave in like 30 seconds, but I do appreciate you guys coming on, and it was awesome getting to talk to you guys. From seeing you on the screen, coaching, to getting to chat with you, it was an awesome experience.
Absolutely. Thanks again to TJ for joining, and have fun. Hopefully you enjoy your dad role for the rest of the day.
Absolutely, guys. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Definitely. Talk to you later, buddy. Coach Coles, I wanted you to kind of lay out the injury late in the season to TJ Edwards. I mean, I think my son says hi.
Go Birds. I like that. I like that helmet back there.
Definitely. I was just going to bring that up, but sorry. I got to stay on track. This is about indoor football, not the Eagles. When TJ got hurt, you guys brought in 2 championship-winning quarterbacks, which I think caught a lot of people off guard. You bring in Sam Castronova, arguably the best quarterback in any indoor league, in my opinion. And then you also bring in Carl Robinson, who won the NAL championship in 2025. How did that all come about? I mean, that kind of caught me off guard when we saw Castronova sign with you guys.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I mean, TJ's injury was just super unfortunate at the end of a game, and you can kind of kick yourself with that because we were down by 20, and I'm just like, this kid shouldn't be in the game right now. And then our left guard is a kid that's been playing basketball his entire life, and had some interest from the UFL, and they're like, hey, you need to go play, guard and go get some film. And he was down in Jacksonville and barely played, and I'm like, no, come on, we'll coach you up, get him some film. And he just made an offensive line move that you're not supposed to do. You never throw a D inside. And I've been harping on TJ about sitting in the pocket and delivering the ball. That's what scouts kind of wanted to see from him. He is very elusive and he can kind of get out and run around, but that's not necessarily what they want from him at the next level. So he was doing what I asked him to do, deliver the ball, sit there in the pocket. And then, we have a guard kind of, throw an inside move. And wasn't anything intentional. Wasn't a dirty play. I saw some talk about that. It was just unfortunate football play, and it happens in our game. But Sauce was a quarterback in our league, Muhammad Rogers, and things happened so quickly in our league, we didn't have time to really find another guy. So we kind of went into that Fishers game. And I'm like, we'll just figure it out. We'll run the ball with Meatball. Well, Meatball gets hurt 2 plays into the game. So our game plan kind of went out the window there, and he's not the best passer. So without having a running game, with Sauce, it kind of limited us, and we got smoked by Fishers. But after that, those guys started reaching out to me, which was kind of nice. I developed a relationship with Sam when I was in Frisco because we played him 4 times. So, pregame, postgame, you wind up talking to a guy, and we just had a mutual respect for each other. And then Carl, a lot of our older Frisco guys were on that Beaumont team. JD Griggs and all those guys were down there, and they're like, hey, we got a quarterback for you if you need one. I'm like, give me his number. And that kid's just as dynamic. I'm telling you, that kid reminds me of TJ's first year. So I'm sure his phone's going to be blowing up. Took him a little bit to get caught up to the speed of the IFL in practice, but I'm telling you that kid's probably the next quarterback in our league. He's dynamic. So it was good to get both of those guys in, but it was, again, just relationships. Sam knew a bunch of our players. They all played golf together in the offseason. And I'm from the Northeast. He's from the Northeast. And, it kind of just worked out. And Carl was just, a benefit of just staying in touch with some of our older Frisco guys. So just relationships, man. That's really what it was.
Maybe you can elaborate on this situation. I heard a rumor when Sam Castronova signed with you guys that there was a little bit of a desire to play against his old coach, Tom Manas. Was that any of his?
No.
Okay.
No. He's not that kind of kid. Like, he's not. If you ever get to meet Sam, he's super competitive and he wants to win at everything he does. If you play checkers against that kid, he's going to sit there till he beats you. But he's got good relationships with all of those coaches. I mean, pregame, they're hugging it out. And I mean, they're talking about golf before they're talking about anything else. So, and Coach Manas isn't that kind of guy either. So, I mean, all of us are competitors on the field. I don't think any of us take that stuff off the field. I mean, in our game and with the state of the league, you're playing each other 2-3 times a season, and games get heated. But it's football, man. None of us are carrying that stuff into our real life. So he had already played a full season in Albany and just wanted to keep playing, and was excited about the opportunity.
Do you have anything for the coaches, Krish?
Yeah, my final question for you, Coach Cole, is have you looked at 2026, coaching free agency? Are you back in Tulsa? How are you going to approach that process?
Honestly, man, it's all open. When you're an assistant, all that stuff is 1-year deals. So I've kind of just been taking the last couple of weeks to just go back through our game film and just evaluate myself and see where I could get better. There's a lot of games I wish I could have back. I think we can all say that. We all make some dumb calls and things like that, but I haven't really dove too much into it yet. I think a lot of that stuff starts to get cleared up like around the championship game. So I don't really have any answers on anything yet. Obviously, I want to keep coaching, and that's where my passion is, but I haven't really been chomping at the bit or reaching out or anything like that yet.
That's fair. Have any teams contacted you about potential head coaching openings?
Myself, no.
That's actually shocking to hear, to be honest.
Well, I mean, there's not that many jobs, right? Like we're not the NFL where there's 7-8 guys getting let go every year. And then I think also too, I think a lot of the ownership groups and things like that, I think they're wrapping up their seasons and their business and kind of figuring out where they want to go. So you get text messages and stuff like that. But I think a lot of that stuff starts to happen this upcoming week with the championship game coming up. I know there's a lot of networking and things that go on that weekend. So we'll see, but it's all kind of up and open in the air.
That's fair. It's still very early, so that definitely makes a lot of sense. Krish, do you have anything else for Coach Coles? Awesome.
No, I appreciate your time. I look forward to see where you land in 2026 for sure.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to, like Krish said, where you end up this season and what ends up transpiring for you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Speak to you later. On that note, we're going to hit another commercial, and then we will transition over to the AF1 segment. We should be joined by our guest here shortly. Coach Mogensen, thank you once again for your time this morning. You can feel free to stick with us through the rest of the show. If you want to jump off at any point, just let me know, and we'll make sure we get you an exit.
All right.
All right, we are back to talk about some AF1. Sorry about the long commercial break. Got to get them all in there. The biggest news that came out of the AF1 as of late is the news that Beaumont has joined the league for the 2026 season. They were the 2025 NAL champions. Coach Mogensen, were you surprised to see the news that Beaumont had moved over to the AF1?
No, I don't think so. I think when they announced they were leaving, you knew it was going to be IFL or AF1. And then once they said they had their league set like 2 weeks ago, they said, oh, we have this announcement. I knew for sure it was AF1. That IFL just wasn't going to announce a new team right in the middle of their playoffs. It wasn't something they're going to do. So I kind of saw the writing on the wall. It's an interesting for me because the dynamic difference in the gameplay from the NAL indoor style to the AF1 and how many of their guys, specifically the quarterback, does he translate to that style of football? Or are you going to see a lot different roster for Beaumont going into the AF1?
I like it. And we are joined by our AF1 guest, head coach Gary Thomas of the Southwest Kansas Storm. Thank you for joining us this morning, Coach.
Hey, how we doing?
Doing great. So obviously, I'm sure you've heard the news. Beaumont has joined the AF1 officially. What are your thoughts on that move?
Honestly, I try to stay in my own lane. I don't really, try to overthink things. So I just don't know enough about them. Don't know enough about the backstory. Don't know about, the funding. I hope it works. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. And I tell you what I don't do is I don't root for anybody's failure. I'm a guy that, and I've told you this, you and I have had lots of conversations, but there's so many, it's all on social media. When I say there's so many, there's just pointing out every little nitpicking thing wrong with everybody, and just why are we so eager to kind of find a way to badmouth opportunities for young people to pursue something that interests them. So that's deviating off the question, but I don't have enough information to form an opinion one way or the other. I just, I'm rooting for them to be successful. So.
Hey, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think we've all seen it. There's always some sort of negative comment from somebody at some point. Doesn't matter the league, doesn't matter the team. Somebody's always got something negative to say. So I definitely see that aspect of it. Did it perk your ears up at all when you saw that, the NAL championship or champion was joining the league, or does it really not matter as far as who you're playing in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, that part, didn't concern me much. Again, I'm a guy that's always worried more about me than who I'm playing. I think the outcome of most games, at least that I've been a part of, have more to do with us than they do with them. We were either didn't make a play, or we were underprepared, or we just didn't find a way to win the game, and so I don't really worry too much about the opponent. So the fact that they won a championship in a different league didn't really resonate, other than the fact that they obviously it's good when accomplished teams want to join, and it's good when teams that have kind of endured they at least survived one season, and that's that's a big obstacle for some people. Getting through the year is a challenge in its own right. So I don't know what the reasoning on their part was to jump from one to the other. I just, again, without having more information, I don't know what their motives were, but it's good to, I think, be surrounded by competent organizations and franchises, and certainly makes it more fun when you're playing good teams with good players.
Absolutely. Krish, you got anything for the coaches?
Yeah, Coach Thomas, I've been extremely critical of you and your center situation specifically. Can you just touch on kind of what not took you so long, but, what you saw in Alex Heil that made you believe he is the franchise center?
You know, I'm not big on making moves just to make moves. You know, we looked for a very long time. I mean, that was not a, you know, some of it was, um, you know, it was a lot of reasons. That's a layered question, but you know, we knew, we're not oblivious. You know, we didn't get this far in life with not being able to look at the film and see what the film says. You know, and we, you know, we scoured the market, and you know, we just couldn't come to a deal with certain guys. We were, you know, a day late on a guy here. You know, a guy had obligations he couldn't get away from in another scenario. You know, we had open competitions in our own camp, and you know, we had one. We opened up a Tuesday practice one day, and we're in a kind of a run mesh period at the beginning, you know, which we kind of do every Tuesday just to kind of hit the ground running and do, you know, about a 15-minute just run mesh and fits and all that kind of stuff. And you know, the guy we're trying to put there goes the wrong way 3 out of like 8 plays, and I'm like, I mean, it ain't rocket science. like I can't. That's the thing I can't help you do. You know, I can't help you go the right way. Like, the plays are the plays. Like, if you don't want to play, I get it. You know, and then all of a sudden Alex is sitting there and he's the guy that's going to go the right way. You know, so it, like I said, it was a layered thing, and you know, there was certain games where we felt that maybe he matched up a little bit better. Not matched up better, but the matchup there wasn't gonna get us beat. You know, so it was, you know, let's continue to stay on track, and you know, we felt like we were good enough in other areas, and maybe that, you know, the thing that hurt us wasn't the big guys, and that's what you would think. You know, Alex is he'll freaking battle, you know, but he's low to the ground. He can hang in there for a little bit against the big guys. It was the 5'11", 6 foot, you know, 285 to 305, the guys that got a pretty elite first and second step. Those are the guys that he struggled with on slants. You know, they would slant one way and they'd get leverage on him, and they dip that inside shoulder, and there was nothing he could do at that point. And that's where we really struggled. So there was games, you know, that we would go into going, well, you know, the nose is, you know, 6'5", 340. He's not going to get to the quarterback. You know, Alex might be going backwards, but he's not going to get to the quarterback. You know, so that was part of it. And I mean, we actively were, you know, looking for the next guy. We just could never come to terms with a guy, and it just kind of played out, you know, the way it played out. But you know, we, on the flip side of that coin, you know, I would listen to you, you know, just you know, say things at time, and you weren't wrong, and that's why I've always loved you. You know, it's one thing to say something about a guy and you're like, wow, he has no idea what he's talking about, like he's just throwing an opinion out there. You know, it's another opinion when a guy actually watches film and watches the game and knows the names and knows other information. You know, I can value that opinion. I may not agree with it, but I can value it. You know, where we struggled at the end of games, and the challenge was, I would flip that narrative and say it wasn't that we were struggling at the ends of games; it's that we were overachieving earlier in the game. You know, when you're in the arena game, it's a 5-man box. You know, and the MAC linebacker is basically another, you know, 260-pound guy. You know, you've got 4 guys within, you know, a yard and a half of the line of scrimmage that are, you know, basically defensive linemen. So you got to get pretty creative in the run game. And for us, it was much easier to run the ball within our normal scheme, which allowed us to throw the ball well, which allowed us to run the ball. We were always keeping people off balance. You know, if you look at the run game of some of the other teams in our league, and not that they weren't good at what they did, they weren't quite as kind of in depth as ours was. You know, we probably use the analogy of, you know, killing a fly with a sledgehammer. You know, we had a pretty robust run game, probably in comparison to a lot of other people, but we needed to do that to keep people off balance, to hide some things. Well, when you get into okay, we had a 14-point lead late in the game. Well, I mean, a 14-point lead is just one possession. Let's be honest. If they got the ball and you're up 14, it's just they only got to get one stop. It's not like you blew the game. They got one stop, and then either scored or even worse. Let's say it's an 8-point lead, or a 9-point lead. You get kicked. You get beat on a late field goal. So, for us, we ran into some problems when people knew that we had to run the ball. And, so there was a game where, we try to run the ball to win, and actually we should have. We get a bad snap, and, it is what it is. But there's another game where I'm like, well, we've thrown the ball for 57 straight minutes and they haven't stopped us. Why would I run the ball? Everyone's like, why didn't you run the ball? I'm like, well, last time I ran the ball and it didn't work, you chopped my head off for that. So now we're going to throw the ball. And, we threw for 350 yards, but, and we missed. The game was over. We just leave the ball inside on a corner route, and the guy, fully extends and lays out and gets just barely a piece of it. That game was over. There's 2 other games where that didn't happen, and we did put the game away. But like I said, that narrative, I think is misrepresented a little bit when you put it in context of, okay, all they have to do is run the ball here. Okay, well, yeah, my center's been going backwards for, 48 snaps now. Yeah, sure. Let's just go ahead and run the ball. It's you got to get a little bit creative. You got to take some chances, and sometimes those don't go your way. And, for us to be, at one point we were, 7-2, the 2 seed, whatever we were. So we were doing, the crazy part was the narrative of, we would win a game and all I would hear was, well, if the other team had a better guy, then they would have won. Well, okay, so then if they would have got a better guy and beat me, and then I could have said, well, if I had a better guy, I could have beat you. Like, where does it stop? So, we beat Billings here when they signed all of Corpus Christi's roster, and then all of a sudden the narrative is, well, those receivers were really good. If they had a better quarterback, they would have beat you. Well, what do you want me to do? Recruit their quarterback for them? I can't control that. All I did was beat the team that showed up, so then they sign a quarterback. We got to go on the road. They get, 2 weeks to get better. We go up there and beat them on the road. And, and Malik Henry had a phenomenal game. Great player. We were better that day. And, and then it was some other, it was some other narrative. It was never that we were just a better team that day. There was always a narrative of, well, if they would have this, if they would have that. Well, I could say the same thing on the games that we lost. If we would have this, if we would have that. So it's always just for me, it's a lazy narrative of, the games that we won, we felt like we did what we needed to do to win the game. The game lost, we didn't do enough to win the game. And, and I always tell our guys too, I used to say this at the collegiate level is, their guys got scholarships too, their guys get paychecks at this level too. They're allowed to make good plays too. There's good players. There's good players on both sides, and again, I get it's a result-oriented business, but, sometimes a guy makes a play, and, sometimes you got to tell your guy, you know what, you did everything we asked you to do, and their guy made a better play. It is what it is, and that's okay. You can't, the sun comes up tomorrow, and, you got to live to fight another day until you hit the playoffs, and then you don't. So anyway, that was a long explanation to your very simple question.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. We like to let you guys talk when you're on here. And I mean, you got more insight than we do. But on that note, you said live to fight another day. And I wanted to kind of ask both of you guys as coaches, how do you keep guys invested when the losses kind of pile up, when you're having tough games, when it seems like the refs are against you, stuff like that? How do you keep guys invested throughout the season, when you seem to keep having tough breaks along the way? Let's go to Coach Mogs first on this one.
I think, one thing to consider in these leagues, in our leagues, and I'm sure the AF1 coach can talk about is the same, refs aren't making a lot of money either. So they're going to screw up in every single game you play. They're going to not be the greatest of refs. So if you get hung up on bad ref calls, you're going to consistently be angry because they're always going to happen. So that's the one thing you have to from camp, especially when you got a bunch of rookies. We always had a bunch of rookies because we weren't paying anybody any money. So we had all these rookies and they expected everything to be, to them, I'm in pro football now. This has got to be everything has to be perfect. And you're like, no, the refs are going to 9 times out of 10 screw a lot of stuff up, and you're going to be pissed off about it. So just deal with it, and we have to overcome bad reffing. And then when you get stuff piling up, man, it's just, what kind of leader are you? How can you figure out what the why is at this point? You get to a point when you're in seasons. I've had good seasons and bad. Obviously, last year wasn't a good one, but at first it's okay. We got to do this, and this to stay in playoff contention. Then once that's over, what's the why to keep playing and keep putting up fights and keep trying to get W's and figure it out? And it's different for every guy. Some guys are like I had a Keon Williams or Cahoon or some of those guys where they're getting legitimate looks from higher leagues. So it's really important for them to go and play. And then you got some guys who probably are never, off our team from last year, will never play pro football again. So then it's like, hey man, might be your only opportunity these last 3 or 4 games. You might never play pro football again. So put the best you can on film, put your best foot forward. Really, that's kind of the flip side, is it kind of merges as the season goes on, depending on how your season's going.
Makes sense. Coach Thomas?
I mean, all good points. And not going to just repeat what he said. Those, it's just, coaching, you have to find what works for each individual team and each individual guy. There's, every guy needs to be approached, a little bit differently. They process information differently. They process emotions differently. So, keeping guys motivated and locked in is always an ongoing thing. And they're not making, obviously life-changing money, but at the end of the day, like, look, we're paid to do a job. The one thing I kind of tell our guys is we're mercenaries. Like we're paid to, what's the definition? A person who's paid to do a job. If you're paid to play, I'm paid to coach. We're both paid to win. That we can't worry about wins and losses and all that kind of stuff. We're going to celebrate the wins. We're going to try to learn from the losses, and but ultimately it's result oriented. The ownership and those guys, they're not here for the feel good stories. They want to win. So we can sit here and cry about it and talk about our emotions, or we can just get back to work and go do the thing that we're paid to do.
Makes sense. Krish, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, Coach. I just wanted to know, Jalen Moore, and obviously, I've talked highly about him all season. What kind of feedback have you received about him from higher levels, like the CFL and UFL?
I don't communicate a ton, at that level. He's got an agent who's seems pretty in tune, with most of the teams that are out there. And he's obviously pretty well plugged in, having been in, so many camps and been exposed to so many, GMs and coaches and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not getting a lot of feedback. The one thing that I continuously say to anyone who will listen, and to myself sometimes in my head, is if there's 8 UFL teams and each of them by rule has to carry 3 quarterbacks, is there really 24 better quarterbacks than Jalen Morton that are out there, and that guy can't play in the UFL? Like that's a question that I can't possibly, like, you would have to show me, because it's not off the field. Like, Jalen is an original, like, just a good human being, good morally, great work ethic. He studies his butt off. He's great under pressure. He's great to coach. When I lose, my mind, he doesn't get rattled because I'm freaked out. He is just very even keel on the field, off the field. He's great in the community. He can survive in any environment, because he's just a good dude. He doesn't take things personal, just all of the things that you would want from, so there's no red flags off the field of why he's not employed. What I can tell you is that in my conversations with him, when he left to go back to Birmingham during our bye week, he actually wasn't supposed to go there. He was supposed to go to the CFL. That's where he was going to. And then he called me on Monday and said, I didn't go. I'm actually going to go to the UFL. They called me. And it all came down to, without, giving out too much personal information. It came down to the length of the contract in the CFL. He actually, according to him, turned down a contract because his goal is not to. He wants one more shot in the NFL, and I think in a perfect world, perfect world, he'd end up in the NFL. But I think his goal would be to end up in the UFL if that doesn't happen. I just don't know that the CFL is in his top few choices. Again, I don't want to speak for him, but that's kind of the vibe that I got from how it kind of played out. But yes, to answer your question, I'm not getting any feedback, but I'd be curious to see what their notes say on why he can't play in the UFL. And I'm not saying that the guys in the UFL aren't qualified, deserving, all that. I know what my eyes tell me, and there can't possibly be 24 better guys in that league than Jalen Morton.
Fair point. We have a couple questions in the chat for you. This one in particular, I had a little chuckle when it came up. So Off the Wall says, "Hi, Coach Thomas, big fan here. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are we to see SWK run a play from under center in 2026?"
What's crazy is I was waiting for this. I wasn't waiting for this here, but I was waiting for it if the scenario came up. We got under center during practice for the Nashville playoff game, and we were going to run some of their arena run game right back at them. It was actually in the game plan, and we had a group. We actually called it Nashville. So the Nashville group was going to go out there and it was going to be for some short yardage goal line stuff, just because Nashville's just so big and physical up front. And about the middle of the second quarter, Logan Wright got hurt, and he was in the Nashville package, and that went out the window pretty fast. We couldn't regroup, and it didn't make sense to start drawing stuff up on the sidelines for a new guy. And then our center got hurt, Josh, so he was playing on one leg, and we just didn't have the personnel to make it work. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's also not. It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning with Krish. Is my philosophy is this: if I know that I'm light at center, why would I want to put my quarterback closer to where my problem is at? My best chance to protect Jalen, which is my obligation as the coach, is to try to keep him as best I can do out of harm's way. Putting him closer to where the action is just didn't make a lot of sense for me or for him. And I think if Jalen was sitting here on the interview, he'd probably co-sign that. That we had a better chance to protect him at 8 yards than we did at if you look at the arena game as a whole, the people that are playing the traditional ones from under center, the Albanys, the Nashvilles, that quarterback's real comfortable sitting there around 4 yards, and that's where the ball's coming out, and that's where they're doing a lot of their work. 4 yards, that wasn't a good place for us to live with the style of play and the personnel. If you look at Nashville's O-line, they're massive. They can hold that pocket long enough to be able to operate. If you look at Albany, they had a very good offensive line. It's a lot easier to do when you're not trying to protect some of the, I don't want to say holes in the roster, because we won a lot of games with those guys, but protecting some of the deficiencies that you see in your roster where you might visually know that you got a bit of a mismatch that you've got to hide.
Definitely makes sense. Coach Mogensen, I wanted to ask you kind of a question that's kind of stemmed from everything we've asked to Coach Thomas. You and your offense in the IFL run a little bit of some arena elements, I want to say, with more of a tight end body out there at the wide receiver position. How do you go about meshing those two styles, and how have you been able to find success with that in more of a run heavy game in the IFL?
Really, for us, it was with us knowing we're going to have, we have the lowest payroll in the league, so it is what it is. And if you're going to do that, like, what's everybody else doing? So my first year in the league, we got the quarterback. We had Darius Peterson, and he was a 4-3 guy, and we're doing all the zone read stuff that everybody's doing, and we had a lot of success. But that's because we had a super elite athlete at quarterback. And if you don't get that athlete, you're not going to be good. So we went at it, looked at it, and goes, everybody else is running all the mobile quarterback stuff and the power read, the Cam Newton stuff. If we do that with a lower kind of athlete across the board on a roster, we're not going to have success offensively. So we looked at what we could do. And, at the end of the day, like I do like running the ball, but if I had my choice, I would throw the ball every single down, which is what we did last year. And, so if we can build something that other people aren't doing. So what happened in the IFL is you saw the influx of the mobile quarterbacks and doing all that running. And then that brought the defense to change. And now all you see is ton of cover two, different variations of who's down and who's deep, but it's always 2 guys down and 2 guys deep. And I just felt like the last couple of years showed it. Like, you're going to run a lot of cover 2, you're going to leave a lot of holes out there for if you have a guy who can throw the ball. So that's really what spurned it, is let's be different, because we know that we're not going to be able to go out and buy the best talent. So how can we be a little bit different and build and maybe value some stuff in players that other people didn't value? So we go out and get, Keon is Keon. He'd have been good in anybody's offense, but like a Keyshawn Taylor who really probably isn't a great value in certain offenses, but in our offenses was phenomenal. Led the league last year in receiving, or Jalen Bracey, or guys like that we were able to bring in that could do that very, very well and allow us to be different. So when you came in, the hard part about that is you'd scout teams, for us at least offensively. We scored a crap ton of points this year. We just couldn't stop anybody. But you see somebody's defense, and then they come out and play them, and all of a sudden after 2 drives, they're running a totally different defense, and they ran against everybody else. That was our issue this year, is we'd come in. I think we had 8 games where we scored in the first play of the game. We had, we were scoring at will early, and then they would adjust to run some kind of soft thing, and that's where we'd have to combat that. But really, it was spurned from how can we be different in comparison to what everybody else is doing in the league to help us compete a little bit better.
Makes sense. Coach Thomas, we have a question for you in the chat here. Do you see any other team additions or removals for next season, and which game rules would you like to see changed?
As far as additions, I don't know. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious like everybody else, because of travel aspects of it. But I know the ones that everybody else knows about. I don't have any necessarily insider information. And if I did, I doubt they'd appreciate me dropping it on here. But as far as rule changes, I don't know, because the game is kind of what the game is. I really enjoy the nets, on the kicking game versus, maybe the indoor game. I actually think maybe it's the indoor leagues, IFL, NAL adopted. And I know it's an extra cost and all that kind of stuff, but it really does add being a fan here first, as a college coach watching the CIF, operating with the same, basically kicking rules as the NAL and the IFL have now, and then seeing the difference, it really does add an aspect that's kind of pretty cool. I don't, as far as rule changes, no, I don't know that there's any that, that I would pound the table on. I did, the one I did not like, where did I go back to the kick game here? Cause that's probably not what anybody wants to talk about. But this year they made the rule that if it touched a board, the ball was dead, and like in the back of the end zone. So I didn't like that, because it allowed, kind of people to kick away from returners if they wanted to. Whereas, and they passed it as a safety, issue, because of the rouge. People were, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't change our approach on kickoff a little bit too. Is, if we can't score on our kickoff team, by getting a point and tackling them there, then we don't need to probably be going down with the tempo that we're going at. We need to make sure we don't give up a home run. If they get a single or a double, that's all right, but let's just try not to avoid the home run. If we give them the ball on the 9 instead of the 2, that's probably not that big of a difference, in a league where offenses, kind of score quite a few points. So, but the one kind of example that they gave was, okay, the ball comes off the net, it drops down, the guy doesn't catch it clean, and he's got his back to the kickoff team, and that kickoff team is coming down because they're trying to score a point by tackling him in the end zone, and the guy gets hit into the boards, head first. Are we just waiting for a catastrophic injury? And that was kind of how it was presented. And you can't argue with that, because you're saying that's 1,000,000 to 1 shot, but it does matter to the one, and so those are, player safety obviously has to be at the forefront of everybody's, everybody's concerns in any league, in any team. And so that's one that I think I didn't like it, but I understood it, and I wasn't gonna, obviously get in, try to pound my, hand on the desk over a safety issue.
Makes sense. Question. So obviously when you first took the job in Southwest Kansas, initially it looked like they were going to return to the CIF until obviously things changed and the AFL came into the picture. How much did you really have to shift your focus, your offense, how you planned on doing things going to the AFL style of play versus the CIF style of play?
Well, I had done a lot of research, and kind of thought I had a pretty good grasp on what I wanted to do, and how I wanted to kind of attack it. And then the whole arena thing started to kind of get a little bit of traction, but I couldn't really get a straight answer early on of what that meant. What rules, are we playing by? And was it going to be, traditional? Was there going to be modifications? Was it, so then once they kind of changed it, then I, kind of went back to the drawing board and kind of redesigned everything. I'd kind of a playbook already made. And then, now I got to go get rid of half my formations and, all that kind of stuff. Can't go empty, can't do all these things. So I think over prepared for some things, in my head, thinking maybe it was going to be something that it ended up not being. That first year, I was kind of blown away at the efficiency and the simplicity of what other people were doing, and I was like, wow, we're way overcomplicated for what we should be doing. So we kind of scaled back, towards the end of the year, and tried to get good at the things that we were doing, that were, try to get good at the 80% of the things that we actually were running, and, there were times that I'd see something and, be like, wow, that's what the old school guys are doing. I probably should be doing that too. That seems like it works, and it's hard to defend. So then there was, the game's been around for 40 years. Some of the things that they were doing 38 years ago are still very effective today. So, we added some of those, pieces along the way. And, but I will tell you that I do think in contrast I know there's a lot of similarities in that they're, both indoor on turf and, field dimensions and all that. But the way the game, you had that second guy in motion, you had that fourth DB, and man, you talk about two entirely different worlds. As I watch, some of the other leagues, our league is, if you took us out of it, it's probably 90% pass. When I look at some of the NAL games specifically, I don't have a stat on this, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were maybe 60% run, in all honesty. And the IFL, I don't know. Again, take maybe Iowa out of it, who threw the ball every play, but by his own admission, but they might be closer maybe to a 50-50 league. I don't know. But I look at, the blue bloods, and I mean that through coaching. You look at, Coach Arbette, who's been around forever in Nashville. They were playing a very original, arena style of football, and they were playing, predominantly, probably 85% man coverage. In the games that I watch in the indoor style, seem, at least appears to me, that it's a heck of a lot of zone. And again, maybe that's the only way you can defend. You get two guys in motion, you can get point of attack pretty quick. So, the best way to probably combat that is to play zones and certain things. And that's, again, not having been in it, I can only imagine that's why people are doing it. And obviously to create confusion and, giving a quarterback a pre-snap look and a post-snap look that aren't the same. And, your only chance for success when leagues are set up for the offenses to score points and for entertainment is to try to change the look for the quarterback to, see if you can't get one turnover a half or one stop a half. But that is just not the case maybe in our league. It is predominantly, at least with certain teams, it's predominantly man coverage. And I'd be lying if I said that there's a lot of holding that goes on in this league that doesn't get called in the defensive secondary. I made a comment, I think it was at the halftime of the playoff game, and if we want to go back to officiating, we can go back there too if you really want to. I know we touched on that a minute ago, but it was like 15-3 on penalties or something like that, and I'm like, and I'm not even arguing that ours weren't penalties. Like, really? Like, I can send you 8 clips that were blatant pass interference, and I actually had a great conversation with one of the backup quarterbacks at one point in time after the game. He came up and wanted to talk about our scheme a little bit, and said, I've been doing this a while. I've never seen anybody do, like no huddle, and I've never seen anybody do what you do. It shouldn't work, but it's working. And I said, my comment to him was, it works a lot better if your DBs will stop grabbing us all over the place. And he said, you know what? We coach that at practice. He said, we call it flag fatigue. He goes, if we hold every play, they're not going to call it every play. And I was like, damn, that makes perfect sense. And he was right, though. They don't call it every play. So you get away with a certain percentage of penalties. I used to tell my son when we were, we'd be doing travel baseball in the summer, and, he'd look at 2 good pitches and not swing at them. And then he'd strike out looking, and I'd be like, what are we doing? Why do we drive 2.5 hours for you to not swing at pitches? And he was like, it wasn't a strike. I go, well, then why are you in the dugout? And he called it a strike. And I go, that guy's making $20. Like, do you think he really cares whether it was, on the corner or not? I go, you're asking a college student who's umping a travel baseball game to be perfect. I go, just swing the bat, like, just swing it all the time, swing it hard, swing it fast. Let's get our money's worth. Let's go. But in some ways, and I'm not downplaying, some of the officiating, but it's, you can't leave the game in their hands, or you're playing with dynamite. You're going to get beat at some point in time on something that, shouldn't have probably happened. But I think we veered off course there, but I just needed to get that out since we were talking about officiating earlier.
That's completely fair. Coach Mogensen, you've jumped back and forth between the two styles, arena and indoor, kind of throughout your career. Talk to us a little bit how you've kind of approached that adaptation from going from one to the other.
Yeah, I started in indoor, so that's the closest to outdoor football. So when I first came from outdoor football into indoor, gosh, almost 20 years ago, it was kind of seamless because the rules were actually, my first year was 7-on-7, so that was a little bit weird. But then the second year was 8-on-8. So that's just like outdoor football. It's just you got a couple less people and you got smaller dimensions, but the defenses are running the same stuff. As coach said, it's like, okay, you're going to give me this shell. I know that when you're in this shell, you're actually going to move here. And it's just trying to get your quarterback to see that and understand that. But the difference is, yeah, you're going to get a lot more zone in the IFL, probably in the NAL too. I haven't watched a ton of NAL film, like from a Coach J perspective, but you're going to get a lot more zone, mostly because of the run game more than anything. If you have a guy like a TJ Edwards or Dalton Sneed or some of these super dynamic quarterbacks, you can't just play man and have all your DBs turn their back to the defense because he's just going to run wild on you. So that's what teams are playing all this cover to get 2 extra guys down there and run support. And that's the difference when you go from indoor to arenas. Like coach said, they're playing tons of man. Like that was AFL football in the 90s, just man up who's my DS. He's going to play a ton of man, and he's going to be better than your dude. And I'm going to hope that my Mac or one of my defensive linemen gets to the quarterback in time, because we're just going to man. We're going to hold the crap out of you. We're going to collision you, which is really hold you at the point when you get to them. Collision means hold. So 100% what Coach is saying is the thing is how when we were in Albany in 21, it was like, okay, we have Darius Prince in his prime at that point. Not that he's not far from his prime right now, but that was him in his prime. And it was like, okay, how long can we just need to protect long enough for Darius to run like a post corner, post curl, something like he'll break his route like 5 times to get open. We just got to make sure that we can protect long enough to do that. So it was a little bit less schematic as it was just how can I get my best player in a position to where I can protect long enough for him to get open, because you're going to play man and you can't cover, that in 21 in Albany had Darius Prince and Malachi Jones. You're not covering both those guys for longer than a couple seconds in man coverage.
Completely fair. Krish, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, Coach Thomas, you guys have been known, recruiting wise to get a lot of guys from the UFL, CFL, NFL. How much inspiration do you take from my Mass Pirates in that recruiting strategy?
I don't even know how to answer that. I will say that I don't follow them obviously quite as close as you, but I do know that they have some what I would consider marquee signees. They've got some kind of bigger name guys. What I will say is when I got into this, and I, having been, like I said, a bystander that was, I had behind the scenes looks because I knew people in the organization, even when I was at the college level. And even after I had got out of football a little bit, I'd come over and watch practice from time to time. And even when they were before the storm, they had, at one point they had like 4 or 5 guys that had played for me in college that were on the team. That had nothing to do with me. It just, I knew people there. So, but when I looked at the overall product, my goal was, I'm all for the diamond in the rough, and we've had, I think our fair share of, Shiloh Flanagan might be the best, example of that. For a guy that didn't even, play college football. Shiloh, I wish you guys got to see him on a daily basis, because he is a freak show. He is a baller. But my goal was, for a guy that works all day, does this after hours, I wanted the least amount of headaches. When I go from work to work, I didn't want to be dealing with a lot of personal lives and spilling into practice time and just having to put out fires and do all that kind of stuff. So we tried to make sure that we did a real good job of vetting guys, and, who can I call that knows that guy that can vouch for him and stuff like that. But I was looking for higher level collegiate football players, and not that the NAIA doesn't have plenty of guys that can come play at this level, and not that the D3s and even D2, I'm a product of the Division II system. So I get all that, but what I wanted guys to understand, the other thing is I didn't my first year, I did not want a lot of vets. And that was maybe me not realizing the value of them at the time, or a combination of also young, hungry and motivated and projected back to outdoor football. But I wanted Division I guys because of the business side of how they operate in college. They are generally, you need to be on time. That's part of the expectation. You need to be accountable. You need to be, the way that the Division I programs are run at this point in time. They have a certain what do you mean I need to be on time for meetings? For a Division I guy, he doesn't even blink. Oh, meetings are at 5:15. Okay, I'll be there at 5:15. They're not going to show up late. They're going to be on time. They're going to be accountable. They understand the business side of it. So I wanted to surround myself with guys like that. The other thing is, I'm not oblivious to the fact that I don't care which league you pick, whether it be the IFL, the NAL, the the GTA, the CPA, the SAT. You can pick whichever one you want. We're the smallest market, I believe, in any of them, and by a lot, I believe. So I wanted guys that were motivated and wanted to go back outdoors. So guys that either had previous experience and were on people's radar, or guys that I evaluated with my own eyeballs of saying, yeah, that guy should be playing, outdoor, making a little bit of money. See if I can't give that guy the platform to, put him in a good scheme, give him a good platform to showcase his abilities, and see if we can't help that guy get back outdoors or get outdoors. So I wanted to surround myself with those guys because I knew that they were going to be hungry every day. It was about something bigger for them. It wasn't necessarily, about this place, I tried to stay away from vets, like I said, and part of that was, I just felt like maybe some of those guys had some comfortability with how things were going to operate, and I knew going in we were going to have to be, pretty relentless and aggressive and kind of how we ran things, and I didn't know how those guys might adjust and adapt and buy in, but I also, I looked at. It's one thing if you're, and I'll use Dallas, for example, as an example, but, if you live in Dallas and they have an indoor football team and you're a really good player, well, it would make sense that, if you've got a job that maybe you can go play for the Dallas team, you can go over there after work, make a little bit of extra money, play a high level of football and what have you. When I looked at it from, okay, you're from, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and you want to move to Dodge City, Kansas at 30 years old for $450 a week. Like, what do we, I just felt like maybe those guys weren't, I might have a harder time getting those guys to buy in because, again, what's your end game, and that this is no disrespect or shade towards vets, but you're not going to project to the next level. Like, I'm not going to sell you a dream that you're going to end up somewhere because you're just not, So, I started kind of drawing a line of, at 28, 30 years old, if you're a guy that we didn't project that was going to be, a guy that could change a game for us, it just didn't make sense to, what are you independently wealthy enough that you can disappear for 4.5 months and move to Dodge City, Kansas, where nobody and just, and you're not going to leave here with much more money than you came with. So I just tried to, that's kind of how I tried to shape the team here to give myself maybe the best chance to operate efficiently and compete with basically some bigger markets.
Krish, do you have anything else? Fair enough. Coach Thomas, thank you so much for your time today. Honestly, I don't want to take up too much of it. We've already been on with 2 hours. So at that point, any final words you got for the Storm fans for 2026?
No, we're looking forward to kind of getting a direction of travel here and starting to building the roster again and, figuring out how many of those pieces we want to kind of bring back and bring in some new faces but as always, it should be fun and we expect to put a pretty competitive football team on the field next year.
Very excited to see what comes of everything. I know there's a lot more announcements to be had in 2026 off season, so excited to see what comes of everything.
Appreciate you guys.
Definitely. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Absolutely. So we're going to hit one more commercial. We'll come back. We'll do the IFL bets, talk a little bit about the TAL championship, and wrap this bad boy up. Thank you, everybody who's tuning in right now. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the like button, comment, follow, subscribe. We're nearing 2,600 subscribers on YouTube, really trying to hit that goal by the end of the day. So if you could help us out by jumping over there and hit the subscribe button, that'd be greatly appreciated. All right, we're going to start with the IFL bets because I feel like Coach probably has some insight on this one. And don't worry, we won't ask you for any insider information. So as far as that goes, let's open it up with Coach Mogensen and get his prediction on the game, and then we'll have Krish jump in with what he thinks the bet of the week is.
Now can I say hi to the guy?
Oh, me? Sorry about that.
I know I'm unfamiliar with the betting line, so I don't know if this is good or bad, but seeming like 1.5 is almost a pick 'em in the IFL at least. So as far as my predictions, I don't think I'm prepared to predict who's going to win yet, but I think it's going to be a high score. And definitely look on that over of 93. I think they'll blow right by that. So I don't know who's going to win. I think it's going to come down to Vegas's defensive line versus Max Mailer. I anticipate Vegas putting up some points regardless of how they do it, whether it's with Delora or if Jerome comes in and runs wild. Their receivers are just so good. Their offensive line is so good. Antonio Wimbush, amazing. So they're going to put up some points. It's just a matter of, I think they'll probably hit that over. And if Vegas's defensive line can generate a couple of stops through getting pressure from Max, the only way you can stop Max is get pressure. It's kind of like that Tom Brady. If you can't get pressure up the middle, Max Miller's going to carve you up and he's going to put up 60, 70 points. So the over is probably a good bet in my eyes. And I really, it's, whatever you think. If you feel like Vegas's D line's going to do well, pick Vegas. If you think that they're not, pick Green Bay.
I like it. Coach, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate everything, all the insight that you've given us. This ended up being a really good episode to have you on with all the different news we were talking about. So I really appreciate you hanging out with us for a couple hours this morning.
Yeah, of course, guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your day, Coach, and look forward to speaking to you in the future.
Talk to you guys.
All right. So once again, that was Coach Mogensen, currently a coaching free agent. So if you are a team out there looking for your next head coach and you want an experienced coach with a track record, Dave Mogensen might be your guy. Highly recommend at least having a conversation with him. I think the world of him. Been one of the guys that I've stayed in touch with over the years and really just have a high opinion of him as a person. And I also
I wouldn't mind him and Andre Cole's a mass 2026, man. I think we could win a championship with both them guys. So
be an interesting choice. I'm just saying it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. So Krish, hit us with your best bets for this week.
Yeah, I'm excited for the championship game. I personally think our 2021 team would smoke both these guys. But at the end of the day, I'm happy for Mike Davis and Vegas, sneaking in the playoffs and, obviously making the championship run. I think Jaden Delore is a really special player. I think this is Jaden Delore's last IFL career game. I project him getting a UFL or CFL opportunity. You look at Tyler Coca and the amount of buzz he got in Nashville. Think about Tyler Coca, but more mobile. This is what Jaden Delore is. And I think he's that special. And so for that reason, man, I think Vegas is going to win. I'm picking Vegas minus 1.5. That's my lock. And I'm picking the over. It's going to be a high-scoring affair both ways. It's going to be a fun game, man. I mean, there's a lot of playmakers. You got Kemo Clark, Lowell Pachon, Andre Williams, and then on the other side, obviously, Randolph, Wyndham, like Wimbush, you can't go wrong either way. And then Desmond Bland, obviously, on the O-line. Like Coach Moog said, man, I think it's going to come down to Vegas' O-line versus Green Bay D-line. That's my matchup to watch. So I'm excited, man. Give me Vegas minus 1.5 and give me the over 93.5. I think that's my lock for sure.
I would say good bets on both fronts. I think Vegas has one of the best offensive lines in the IFL, and you could say the same about Green Bay's defensive line. They have one of the most talented units in the IFL, and it's not really probably very close, to be honest, and that's probably why they're there. The over 93.5, I feel is like a very low threshold for the over-under in this game. I think that I think that there's going to be a ton of points scored. Off the wall, chiming in here.
I love this comment. As long as I'm alive, you will never wear a Pirates t-shirt or a hat. Like, I will make sure our marketing department knows not to send you anything. because you jump from team to team, and we don't like that.
Whoa, okay. That's the pot calling the kettle black if I've ever heard it before. Mister, I've had 42 NAL teams this season alone. But
nah. I mean, look, I believe in Vegas now, Trey. You know, I think he called it first. I got to give him credit. You know, he said early on in the playoffs that Vegas was going to win the championship, and I thought he was just messing around. But, you know, I mean, he proved to be right. So I can't be mad about it.
He did indeed. So we're going to transition a little bit, and we're going to shift over to the TAL. Hit you guys with one more commercial break, and then we will wrap this bad boy up with talk about the TAL awards that were given out recently, which we did not discuss last week, and then we'll recap the championship. We're not going to get too in-depth because we plan on having a recap episode with some of the coaches and members of the teams in the upcoming weeks, but we'll definitely at least give a quick rundown of the championship game.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
All right, we are back to discuss the TAL and then close this bad boy out. So as you can see here, this is the head coach of the year, or coach of the year for the TAL, Bones Bagante, head coach of the Hot Springs Wise Guys. We've briefly discussed this. As you can see, he's got this ugly logo right here on his shirt from previous years. I'm sure Krish has some things to say about his opinion on Coach Bones and what he was able to achieve this season.
I give Tony and them guys a lot of credit, you know, Coach Tony over in Duluth, man, but Coach Bones needs some respect too. You know, I mean, he came in and he coached offense and defense, and I feel like he did the best he could. I told you what the game plan was last week. You know, no one wanted to listen. I told you Ambrose would need to throw from inside the pocket, and he wouldn't be able to roll out the pocket, and we saw the result. Jordan Ambrose is not a pocket passer in any league. He's not. And unfortunately, you know, Duluth did a great job, and shout out to their D-line. They really kept him in the pocket, and they made him uncomfortable. So, but Bones did a great job this year, man. I'm proud of him. I think he'll be back next year with that program, and he's going to just continue to build. He's going to get better players because now guys see Hot Springs is legit. It's a legit market. Why wouldn't you want to play in Hot Springs? So I see a lot of big quality guys. In terms of Bones, man, I would love. I mean, if Bones wanted to, you know, come and interview for the head coach job, I would take him. You know, I mean, I think Bones understands what this program is. Players love Bones. If that's an option, I'm highly in favor of Bones interviewing for that job, or at least getting a shot at it. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to next year for Hot Springs if he does end up returning, which I heard that he is returning.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel like, why wouldn't you return if you have no, you know, if you don't have anything else that makes more sense? But at the same time, if I'm the Pirates, I'm definitely giving this guy a call and seeing what he's thinking for the 2026 season. I mean, I think he would be high up on the list. He knows how the organization operates. He's worked with Jawad before. You know, chances are he's going to be a lot more equipped than most outside candidates to come in and kind of, you know, jump right in with the Mass Pirates way and go on about business with the way they operate. So I think it would make a lot of sense for them to look at him. I think it would make a lot of sense if a team like Duke City, you know, or some of the other teams in the IFL or NAL took a look at him, you know, because of his ability to coach the Wise Guys this year. Sorry, let me back up just a little bit. We have the 2025 Offensive MVP, running back Brandon Mackey from the Ozarks Lunkers. Give me your thoughts on this one.
I love Brandon Mackey. I think Brandon Mackey can play at any level. Honestly, I think he should. I've been playing the IFL next year, NAL. Like he should be. He's someone that I can definitely see playing at the CFL level. I think he would be deadly in open space. Southwest Kansas and Coach Thomas should take a look at him. Honestly, I mean, with Logan Wright. I mean, if you think Logan Wright is an elite running back, I don't know what you would consider this kid. I mean, he's worldly, man. Like he's a god. Brandon Mackey's a stud. I want to see Brandon Mackey at a high level. I think he was a bright spot. I mean, he was a victim of terrible offensive play calling. Terrible. He was not on a good. That Ozarks team was not good. Their defense was not good, and he really, showed out and showed up and was a bright spot on his team. So definitely, a guy like him deserves an opportunity.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely have an opportunity at a higher level this offseason or this season. He's a tremendous player. Not sure he really fits the arena skill set as a running back, but I do 100% agree that he could play in the CFL in a heartbeat. I think he's very explosive. He's got a quick first step, great vision. He's good out of the backfield as a receiver, could honestly help in the return game as well. There's a lot of reasons why an outdoor team should be taking a look at Mackey in 2026 and beyond. So would not shock me at all if you got some UFL or CFL interest. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned the CFLs in particular, because I think that skill set that rule set really kind of fits his skill set in terms of, allowing him to get into the open field a little bit earlier and do what he can do. So definitely would not be surprised at the slightest if he ends up getting outdoor interest. And honestly, I think he very, very strongly deserves it. Check out his recent interview with Off the Wall, who's been in the comments this whole time, and make sure you check that out. Great player, and hopefully we see him achieve nothing but success in the future. But the defensive MVP for the league was Marcel Brooks from the Iowa Woo. Do you have any insights onto Brooks?
Yeah, Marcel's a player. He's been playing with Victor Mann for a while. He was on the original Bulls team. He was the defensive MVP there as well, and he won a championship. I'm really surprised. I'm really, surprised he was able to translate to this high level really well. He's proven. I mean, if Victor Mann is the head coach in Dallas, that would be a player. I think he'll be on the Dallas Bulls team either way. He lives in Dallas. He's a local, so I want to see why not. But yeah, no, it's definitely good. It's a good fit. He balled out this year for Iowa Woo. I was saying Iowa Woo D-line is terrible, and he was a really good in that DB. He really kept that DB room together, being the only vet in that DB lineup. So
that's fair. And honestly, would not surprise me. And it would make a lot of sense if you go to Victor Mann for the head coaching position for that Dallas Bulls team and you import a lot of these guys from the Woo. They were just playing this past season, a lot of chemistry there with that team and that coaching staff. So it would make a lot of sense. And if I'm not mistaken, most of the coaching staff with the Woo are actually local to Texas originally as well. So that could be another thing to watch there. Looking back at the championship game just a little bit, like I said, we're not going to do a terribly in-depth breakdown of the game, but were you surprised to see Duluth pull it out again, or was it a situation where, to you, that there was one key to this game and it didn't happen, so therefore Duluth was going to win the game?
I mean, let's just call it how it is. That team is filled with monsters all around the field. I mean, it wasn't a matter of if they were going to win, it's when they were going to win. Honestly, I mean, they just, I think coaching has a lot to do with it, but it's more culture. I think Coach Tony's biggest strength is not X's and O's. It's more of a culture and being able to maintain a stable of so many dogs and keeping the egos in check and for one common goal. That's his strength as a culture builder and an identity builder. And that's like what Deion Sanders does in Colorado. And I think what he's going to do this year is like, you surround yourself with people that know the game. Darren Clark has been around this game for a while. And I'm not saying like, am I ready to go say Darren Clark is going to be the next head coach of the Indy Fisher Freight, like some people on social media are saying no. But Darren Clark is a good coach. He's a good up-and-coming football coach. And I think you surround yourself with people that know about the game, you'll be successful. And that's credit to Coach Tony, man. I mean, it's sometimes hard. Sometimes coaches don't want to, put their egos aside and surround themselves with good people. And he did that. And so that's why he's successful. And that's why he'll always be successful in that league, because he's constantly looking to improve. I was telling someone this the other day. I said, look at that receiving core. I keep talking about this receiving core because it's insanity. That receiving core from last year, they could have literally took everyone from last year and re-signed them. But instead, they went and they got a 10 times better slot receiver. They got a 10 times better out wide guy. They got a 10 times better running back. They improved at every single position on that football team. Every single. I mean, I love Javonte, but Javante's job is easy. With the amount of playmakers he has, all he has to do, he's a point guard. That's all he is. He's a point guard because he has so many ballers around him. So I guess my question for you is, how many players from that Duluth team could you see playing the IFL next year? And who are some of the guys you really believe belong at the IFL level?
Well, I think there's a couple players on that team that I think could make the jump. As far as like in particular names, I think Darius Morrison definitely put himself out there this season, especially with the fact that he was able to play some linebacker and he's primarily a running back. He's a very explosive player, has the size and speed to be dangerous in the IFL game. I think maybe he lacks a couple of the skills that, as far as like a receiver out of the backfield, he's not necessarily as good as you may like to see. But other than that, I think he fits the IFL gameplay perfectly. Was it Hassan Brockman? That's his last name, right? I think he makes some sense for some teams. He does a lot of different things. He can fit a lot of different roles. Reminds me a lot of a guy like Rudy Johnson in San Diego, where you can kind of just plug him in wherever you need a player for a week and he'll get by. He may not be the best option in any one position, but he's a really versatile guy. And I think those guys have a lot of value in the IFL and leagues like it due to the smaller roster size. So those are two guys that really stick out to me. I'll be real honest. I don't know Duluth's roster incredibly well, so I'm sure you have a couple more guys that really deserve to make that jump as well.
Yeah, one guy, surprised me is Michael Austin Fields. He's a D lineman. He's a former military vet, so he's an older guy. But I really think he could be really good in the AF1 as an interior D lineman, as a fullback as well. I think he'll dominate. Shai Hill, obviously, led the AF1 in sacks, so that's known. But another guy that stands out to me is Jamal Couch. Jamal Couch was in Northern Arizona before the season. He was the first active North IFL player to jump to the TAL from my record. But I think Jamal Couch fits better in the AF1 as a stationary receiver. I think him in the AF1 would be deadly. I think Jamal Couch should knock on the IFL and go AF1. Big body receiver, end zone threat in the AF1, absolutely. Jamal Couch should look at that. Quintavious Workman, I think Quintavious Workman should play in the IFL next year. I think he's so good. His route running is amazing, so clean. Dan Williams, I think Dan should get an opportunity with an IFL team, or even, I want to say UFL, but the thing is, I feel like you need one solid year in the IFL before you can really make that jump from the TAL to the UFL, if that makes sense. Just because of the way it translates and stuff. And then Derek Demo, I'm trying to get Demo with the IFL team next year. That would be good for him to be in the IFL, and I think he'll do really great things over there. On defense for them, Dante Mason, we know him in Wheeling, right? He was top 2 in NAL in tackles. Trey Wortham belongs to the UFL. Trey is a baller. He's a really good player, really good DB, really good hands. They just got so many guys. I think another guy that stands out to me is Marcus Sessom. I talked about him last week. He's more of the running back, scat back they got there. I think he's amazing. I think he's another player I want to see in the AF1, as a receiver. So they have so many good. Marcus Sessom is like a bigger version of Charles Hall in Southwest Kansas. He's like a bigger, stronger version of, and the route running wise, like he's very similar to Charles Hall in Southwest Kansas. So that's an interesting comparison. But there's a ton of guys, honestly.
I like this question. What about AF1 level, or do you think it's not worth it going from TAL to AF1? I actually think that the way the TAL is scheduled, it makes a lot of sense for players to go the other way, to join the AF1 and then jump over the TAL after their season, because then they can catch on for a playoff run and have, maybe as many as 4 to 5 games left in the season. So there was quite a few players that did that. As the season progressed, guys would get cut from AF1 squads, and then they would go join the TAL and continue playing. So I think the TL's timing does a lot for them in terms of getting talent there, and then potentially bringing in players that are looking to continue playing after their seasons are over.
I think another thing is people need to realize too, like the UFL is such a great league and every player wants to play. But I use a guy like Khalil Finley as an example. I mean, Khalil Finley last year compared to this year in the IFL, there's no comparison. He has improved so much as a raw athlete and as a DB. It's unbelievable. Like, go turn on the tape, man. Like, I mean, last year he could hardly play zone last year in the IFL. And I look at him this year, man. I mean, that's what a TL can do. It can develop players. And that's what I look at it as a league, to develop guys and make them better and kind of get them ready for that next step, honestly.
I would agree. I think it's a really good stepping stone. And like I said, it's also a good place where, guys can continue playing after their other season is over. Or, if you play in one of the outdoor leagues that's very early on, you can come in and play in the TAL as well. So it's very interesting. And I think that the football ecosystem, like Trey just mentioned, is not only developing more of a tier system, but I think it's also starting to overlap a lot. Like, for instance, you're going to see guys that are coming from, say an AF1 team and jump to the LFA and go over there, play for a while, and then finish out the season in the TAL, a la Quintavious Workman you just mentioned, who kind of jumped around quite a bit this season. Stuff like that. So I think it makes it interesting to kind of track the movement. And then, I also think it would be interesting to track the statistics for guys that as they jump across league to league, and that's something that I wish somebody would go out and develop as a stat tracking system to track all of it. But Off the Wall says TL season start time with addition of new teams next year is going to be intriguing. Do they bump up calendar start time and compete, or start later again like they did this year? In my personal opinion, if you could make it work with a season, you should actually push the season start time back a little bit. Now, obviously, you don't want to overlap with the NFL. You want to be done at least by the end of the preseason. You don't want to compete with regular season games, but I think you can carry the TAL season into the end of the preseason and still get a decent enough viewership away from NFL preseason games. Maybe that's just me, but I think if you push the season back, and it doesn't have to be much, maybe you start mid-June, maybe you start late June, just push back 2 or 3 weeks, you all of a sudden open yourself up to a whole nother group of players that are coming from the NAL, the IFL, AF1 as their seasons start to wrap up, and could potentially make for even more competitive games moving forward, and then also more intriguing player movement from league to league. But Krish, what are your thoughts on potentially moving the season up or potentially back?
I think moving it up would be nice. I like, how TAL kind of has its own window overlapping with the IFL. But I don't think it's I don't think it's necessary. I think the fact that we have indoor football up until college football season starts is really good. I think it keeps people engaged year round, and I think that's the goal. I would love to see a league start after, the Super Bowl in February. I think that would be really huge. But I don't know if they would push it up that early. So I would just keep the same schedule.
I would love to see, like the NAL start, a week or two after the Super Bowl, and, start sometime in February, and then, run till, maybe you finish the season in late May. I would have to do all the math on how that would work, but, finish the season late May, and then you give an opportunity to your guys to maybe jump to, the CFL before the season ever even begins. Stuff like that. There's a lot of opportunity there for moving the season up. You also would be kicking off your season, without competition. The IFL wouldn't be playing, the AF1 wouldn't be playing. So that's something that I would like to see from leagues like that. off the wall mentions 2000s AFL started second week of February, right after the Super Bowl. It was awesome. I agree. I loved when the XFL did that recently as well. S2 says, I'm ready to see what other teams will be added to AFL. AF1 and TAL, I'm hearing they are both adding. TAL has come out and said, actually on Off the Walls podcast, that they will be trying to add up to 4 teams in 2026. And the AF1 is also going to be adding at least a couple teams. Well, actually, at least one more team. And then they also might be losing some teams. So there's going to be a lot of information coming up over the next couple weeks. So hopefully you stick with us, tune back in next Saturday, and get all the latest updates. And we discuss all the latest topics that have kind of come up as the week has gone on. But with the Tyler Creed announcement coming up on the 20th, as well as many more announcements expected, we're going to have nothing but entertaining shows the rest of the way throughout the summer at the very least. So stick with us, and we'll definitely be covering all of that, plus the startup of the UIFA with Coach B, who will be joining us on a weekly basis as well. Krish, any final thoughts? Anything you wanted to throw out there before we get out of here for the day?
Yeah, I'm really excited for next week's championship game. I'm excited to see what happens to my beloved franchise, what decision we make. I mean, we haven't put season tickets on deposit yet, so that's kind of concerning. But I mean, we all know how the Indo football world works. You got a business required money to continue to flow. So, whatever decision has to be made, I'll support. But I'm excited for next week. I think there's some big news to come out of league meetings from what I'm hearing and talking to people. Like, the IFL is really going to shake up the industry in a big way. And I think they're going to come out this weekend and just, again, solidify themselves as the number 1 league in the country. There's some big things happening in the IFL, so I'm really excited. And I think I just want to add, I think Todd is the best commissioner in any of these leagues, by far. I think the work he's done, his legacy is he's going to go down as one of the best ever to do it, because he's really grown the league in a positive way. He's really trying to make it run professionally, and every team, make sure they have their resources. So I think 3 teams that I could see relocating next year, just to put this out there, is us. I could see us relocating. I could see Bay Area relocating. I could see San Diego relocating. Those are the 3. San Diego, I think, ends up staying. I have a weird feeling about that. But Bay Area, I think, does relocate. And I think we do end up moving. I don't know where, but I think we are going to move, unfortunately. So
It's definitely going to be an interesting offseason. There's lots and lots left to go until we get to the season. It's only the middle of August. There's still 4 months plus until any of these seasons kick off. So we're going to have a ton of information coming at you guys. And like I said, plus the start of the UIFA season, as well as, free agency and all of that. So definitely stick with us the rest of the year at the minimum, and we might actually just carry this show right into next year and just keep it a year-round show at this point with all the leagues that are kicking off and playing. So if you want to see us continue this season or this show throughout the calendar year and make it basically nonstop, hit the like button. If we top 20 likes on this show, we'll go throughout the whole season. We're at 8 now. Let's see another 12 pop up there. On another note, if you have not checked it out yet, go check out brandingblanks.com. Look at the Shady Sports Network merchandise that is on there. We are partnered with Branding Blanks to provide you a more seamless purchasing avenue. Our website just simply was not the easiest way to go about purchasing the merchandise. So you can find all of our clothing merch on brandingblanks.com. We also have stickers available, $1 a piece. If you want those, you can message us on any of our social media apps, and we will get them shipped out to you immediately. That's the best possible way that you can support this channel. We are an independent media source. This does cost us money to run and operate. So on that note, any and all support is very, very much appreciated. And on that note, if you could jump over and subscribe to the YouTube channel, that would also help us out. With all that being said, we will catch you guys next Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern for another great episode of Around the Indoor Football World as we discuss all the news from the TAL, IFL, NAL, and AF1. Catch you guys next week.